Development Authority, my effort is to bring more people to the area of Tacoma Park so our business can grow. That is our main effort. And secondly, I want to bring the Hindu community as well as other communities to the Mela so that we can talk to each other, get friendly with each other.
I grew up in Washington. But I like all the communities to come together and make it a more diverse place.
This is really just one neighborhood. The Crossroads area is a vital economic business neighborhood, and the businesses here are doing really well and serving so many different kinds of people from around the world who live in this area and make it so exciting.
तेरे नखरे उठाऊं सनम मुझको तेरी कसम टांग दूं चांद को तेरी खिड़की पे मैं ताक दूं चांद को तेरी कुर्सी पे मैं अरे जो भी मैं कहूँ तुझे लगता है क्यों गलत गलत तेरा ध्येय
The people do not know about the Diwali. What the meaning of Diwali, how to celebrate. So they demonstrate to other community, to other country people how to celebrate Diwali at actual. So they demonstrate.
Where else are you going to encounter this culture if you're not already a part of it, right? So, having these kind of community events allows for other folks who may not be familiar with the Diwali culture to come and learn about it and experience it. And we need to do that for the various cultures we have in this area, both in Prince George's and Montgomery counties, but all throughout this region. We're blessed to live amongst so many different kind of folks we can learn from. We need to take advantage of that. It's what makes us stronger. We're stronger together.
Many times people are trying to divide us rather than bring us together. And I think even more so than at other times right now, we need to be coming together on special days like today to show that we're stronger together when we put aside differences and really celebrate our diversity. So that's what today's about.
I think it's enormously important in making people feel welcome, making people feel a sense of pride, making people who don't know about Diwali feel like they can come here and learn about a community and a tradition and learn a cultural history that they weren't aware of. And that's fantastic. That's what makes people move to Montgomery and Prince George's County and makes businesses move here as well.
I think it adds awareness. It adds awareness that this community exists, that this community is here, that it is part of our society here, and it's just it's a opportunity to just share our values, our way of living, and just educate folks as to what's going on, and I think this is just a great opportunity for us to be able to learn from each other.
So we're bringing the world to this region, bringing the world to Prince George's County, bringing the world to Montgomery County, bringing the world to this region and all of the various cultures, the diversity. This is what we should celebrate. I know there's a lot of stuff floating around trying to divide us. This is the opposite. This is celebrating our diversity, and in that there is unity.
Lift up your voice, sing hallelujah. Angels of course gather round. It is worth remembering every time the angels sing, dreaming of the day where once upon a shooting star, little visions from afar serve to light the way, and all is
All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order this session of the Tacoma Park City Council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kovar.
Here.
Councilmember Mayo.
Here.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
All right, terrific. Before I go over agenda items, I just wanted to speak to one thing because I've gotten a number of emails or questions over the last couple of weeks regarding the format for our city council meetings. And I just want to say that our Wednesday night meetings that we have pretty much every week at 7:30, the structure for these meetings, some of it's dictated by state law, some of it's written into our charter, and some of it is dictated by procedures that we put in place as a new council last year. After the election, we discussed our meetings and how they would function, and we voted on a set of procedures. And you can look at the city website, look at how public comments are made and other things. So I just wanted to lay that groundwork for folks because I got a lot of questions. And the reason we as a council, when we first came together, thought it was important to reiterate how we function on Wednesday evenings during our public meetings was to make sure that there was an expected, fair, open, and efficient system for how we did our work. And that doesn't mean that all work gets done here. Many times we hold open houses, we have joint meetings with committees, and individual council members have meetings with constituents, and there are a number of other ways we collect comments and information and have dialogue with residents. But just to review for this evening, when we do public comments, we do them on voting items first. Unless requested prior to the meeting, public comments, we ask you to keep them to 3 minutes. When you go to the podium to speak, we ask that you state your name and where you live. All right? So I just wanted to set that context for tonight. Looking at our agenda items moving forward, first, Happy New Year, everyone. This is our first official meeting back. On Monday night, the council did meet for one of our council retreat sessions. We will have the second of those on this coming Tuesday, January 17th at 6 p.m. in the Hydrangea Room. Those meetings are open to the public, so if you'd like to attend those, please do. Those are meetings at which the City Council reviews our priorities and starts laying the groundwork for the budget discussions we will have. On our meeting this past Monday, we had a presentation from someone from the National League of Cities regarding racial equity and what it would look like in the city if we adopted a racial equity framework to think about our policy and programs. So it was a very interesting presentation, and I think we'll have ongoing conversations on the council on what that might look like moving forward. So that's next Tuesday, January 17th. And then on Wednesday, January 18th, we'll be back here for our regular 7:30 council meeting. We will begin the meeting with a presentation from Crossroads Farmers Market, an update of their 2016 highlights. And then for our voting session, we will have a resolution on the Tacoma Park Scholarship Program for Montgomery College students, which we'll be discussing this evening. And tentatively, we have scheduled a budget amendment. It will be our second budget amendment for FY 2017. After the public meeting, we will have an administrative function next week to discuss legal services. We canceled the administrative function that we were supposed to have earlier tonight at 6 p.m. due to some illnesses, other things coming up for members of the council. So we're going to move that administrative function to next week after our Wednesday meeting. Then on Wednesday, January 25th, we have a voting session. We have a single reading ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract for services with I Can Shine, a single reading ordinance authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Tacoma Folk Festival, and a single reading ordinance authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Independence Day Committee. Our work sections on the 25th of January will be regarding the Board of Elections, the synchronization of our election dates. We'll get an update on that. A discussion of personal property tax bill for a particular city business. And then tentatively, we have scheduled a discussion of proposed vendor for housing and economic development strategic plan. And then we'll go through that. We'll go through January. All right. So the next item up we have are public comments on voting items. We have 3 voting items on our agenda this evening. The first voting item is a resolution affirming the Green Team priorities. Do we have any comments regarding that? No? All right. The next is a resolution providing for an appointment to the Tacoma Junction Community Consultation Process Advisory Committee. Any comments on that? All right. Our third voting item tonight is a vote related to Section 4 of our development agreement, the LOI between NDC, our development agreement between NDC and the City of Tacoma Park. I know there were a number of residents who had requested additional time for that. Ms. Berger, would you like to kick us off?
In the beginning, co-op and the community were told to trust the process. I'm sure not one of you realized how horrible that process was going to be and how divisive. Plans for the junction development have changed many times since NDC submitted their response to the RFP in May of 2014. The latest proposals, even the one NDC offered last Friday, included their preferred concepts. Both of these involved NDC gaining control of the Turner building in order to demolish it, which was the preference, or repurpose it. And TPSS would move into an entirely new space. We have no idea the origin of this plan, as the Turner building is on private property and was never part of the parcel under the RFP. We have explained in great length repeatedly why legally, morally, and ethically we won't break our lease with the Turner Trust, and will remain in our building for the duration of our current lease and hopefully well beyond. As an aside, the 75-year-old Turner Building is an interesting part of Tacoma Park history. Built in 1941 as a Safeway or Sanitary Grocers, which Safeway then took over. On January 2nd, NDC and TPSS met, and NDC, in an effort to address our concerns about deliveries, came up with a modified proposal. Attach the co-op's expansion to the west as originally proposed over 2.5 years ago, and construct a delivery entrance to the co-op at the front of the development, thus cutting down the distance goods would have to be transported manually. This was a promising last-minute idea, so TPSS requested a detailed diagram of how it would look. And we received NDC's latest cover letter, LOI, and diagram late last Friday afternoon. I responded at 5:15 p.m. with the following message. TPSS is revising the LOI we submitted last week to reflect the addition of the lay-by and removal of the requirement for an unloading area within the development proper. We hope to finalize the LOI by close of business Monday, dependent upon the availability of our attorney who is traveling this weekend. We also needed time to have our architect and development consultant review the new plan. As a result, our previous LOI required many additions and revisions to include acceptance of the lay-by. Yesterday, we submitted an LOI that includes TPSS's acceptance of this idea. Because the plans for the development are in constant flux, because of the unknowns and risks TPSS faces in trying to make the lay-by work, we built into the LOI several safeguards. We also needed to specify and lock down certain fundamentals, not the color of the facade, but how the lifeblood deliveries to the store could be handled efficiently, economically, and safely. We could not make a 19-year commitment to something without trying to address every possible pitfall. As was the case with our previous LOI, this new version is of the length and format that one would expect from a potential anchor grocery store, contemplating leasing space in an unbuilt, undesigned development fraught with so many uncertainties. We've also heard several times about during the process that no one would get everything they wanted, and that there would have to be compromises. Has the co-op compromised? We have accepted the lay-by in order to remain part of the project. The co-op is giving up the type of loading dock, unloading area that a grocery store would expect, and is willing to try to make the lay-by work. That's quite a compromise. We've heard many times about the money NDC has spent on architects and studies. For a developer, that's part of doing business. The co-op has spent over $175,000 trying to make this development work. That's in addition to the cost of our doing business. We have been reminded many times that the LOI is not binding. We have been urged over and over to sign it, and we've signed it. Thank you.
Great. I think, Ms. Curran, did you want to go next since you had asked for additional time this evening? And I believe you have some visuals. Do we have those available? Do you have those, Jesse?
Yes. He should be able to pull them up.
Okay.
Good evening. My name's Diane Curran. I live on Montgomery Avenue, and I'm part of a group that has represented about 600 people in Tacoma Park, that we are supporters of the co-op, supporters of sound development of Tacoma Junction. And I have a couple of points I'd like to make tonight. One, it's very disappointing that an LOI hasn't been signed, because we'd like to see a development program go ahead on the Junction site. But we also want to emphasize that there's been a lot of talk that the co-op has been unreasonable and intransigent in this process. And we don't think that's the case. There's been talk about how the city shouldn't coddle the co-op, but it doesn't seem like the co-op's behaved unlike any other business that reasonably tries to protect its business interests by staying on a site where it's paying a reasonable amount of rent And we did not find out until the last city council meeting. I don't think anybody knew until then that it was part of NDC's, a fundamental part of NDC's proposal that the co-op would move off of its current property. That's a huge change for the co-op. If you look at this, I think this is the slide of NDC's original proposal to the city. This was the proposal that was accepted by the city. This proposal has the co-op staying on its original site where it is now, expanding into the city property, and there's a loading dock around the back there in that little black area. That was what everyone assumed was in NDC's mind when this process started. And now at the 11th hour, the primary proposal NDC made was that the co-op should move. And we've also learned that the NDC would have liked to buy the Turner property, demolish the building, or use it for something else. And I don't think anybody really anticipated that when this whole process started. It looks like the city's determined to go ahead with having NDC look for an anchor tenant. But we would strongly urge you to encourage in every way you can, to encourage these two parties to come together and reach an agreement. I think you heard Marilyn Berger say that the co-op has made a pretty extraordinary compromise by offering to use a lay-by instead of the loading dock to the side of the building. That is a huge change for the co-op. But as Marilyn was saying, there's some changes or accommodations that may need to be made to make that work. We hope the city will get behind the co-op and try to help promote an agreement that works for all parties. And if it doesn't work to have the co-op be the anchor tenant, if something else happens and the co-op merely stays in the place where it is now, in addressing what is reasonable accommodation for the co-op, we pray the council not treat the co-op as some kind of intransigent or uncooperative party here, because the co-op has, in our view, made a good effort to come to agreement with NDC and should be treated with deference and respect and an effort to make sure that the co-op's needs are met in the next stage of the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. I don't see the other person who had requested additional time, so if we'll just open this up for public comments. So if you have any comments on this voting item, please come to the podium, state your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Christina Fitzpatrick. I'm in Ward 3 on Manor Circle. And I was just coming today to encourage the council to move ahead with the development of the Tacoma Junction with NDC. It's been a thorough, thoughtful, deliberative process. I've seen it over the years. It's been through a number of councils. And at every step of the way, there's been a lot of consideration given and a lot of thought and caring about what is best for the community. And so I just encourage you to go ahead with it. There's been a lot of changes over time in terms of amending the agreement and other things like that. So you've done a good job. And so I just wanted to encourage you to move forward.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Townsend. I also live on Manor Circle, and I want to be clear that my term as a board member of the TPSS Co-op has ended, and I'm speaking entirely on my own behalf and not for the co-op. However, I did move to Tacoma Park because of the co-op, and I don't need a development. I need a co-op in my town. And so I would say, like, if they can't give us the thing that we thought we were getting, then it's fine with me if you just cancel the development. Like, give them the money. Like, the co-op's already spent way more than that $75,000 you'd give them. If they can't do it, we don't need it. And I'll just say, if we lose the co-op, if the co-op moves, if the co-op closes, I probably have another 5 decades in this town, and I'm going to curse the council every single time I run out of garlic in the middle of a recipe.
Hi, Mike Tabor. I lived in Tacoma Park for about 30 years. I do get the perception, and because of my work, I'm not involved that much in speaking up about this, although I remember giving out apples at one of the sessions earlier. But you do seem to be judging the co-op harshly. The co-op appears to be treated like an orphan, and a developer who was in here just for one thing, to make money, then leave, seems to be getting a lot of priority over an institution that's beloved by most of us in the community. When I looked at that plan, I deliver our apples and produce to the co-op on a regular basis, although it's the end of the season, so I won't be doing it that much longer until the summer. I can't help but notice that when I come for my delivery, there's usually a tractor trailer and then at least another two box trucks, like my truck. There's no room for those box trucks under that present plan that seems to have been accepted at the insistence of the developer. And that's one of my concerns. Once I can't make the delivery, it's very hard for me to come back. I'm off to Baltimore, back to my farm. But again, the perception is that you are treating the co-op with a lot of insignificant feeling, the co-op being the cornerstone for so many of us in Tacoma Park. And if you go there like I do, the co-op is an employer of the largest variety of refugees, people who have come to Tacoma Park seeking a better life, trying to find a better way to live, and to brush off the co-op, which is the perception that a lot of us have, really is an ugly thing in the eyes of so many of us who live in Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mike Royce. I live on Park Avenue in Ward 1. I'm here in support of voting for moving forward with the development process and voting to allow NDC to select another anchor tenant. I feel this process has gone on long enough. I disagree with previous speakers. I think the City Council has bent over backwards for the co-op during this process. When I moved here about a year and a half ago with my wife, before we moved here, I actually did not want to move to Tacoma Park. My wife did. And my main reason is because there were hardly any businesses that I wanted to go to. It's like, you got to be kidding me. This is it? Now, that might sound a little harsh. I've changed my mind now, but I would like to see more businesses to go to. And, you know, restaurants, delis, a butcher shop, some places that I can actually use. So please, I urge you to vote to allow the process move forward, and I think you've done a good job up until this point. And please continue. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Matson. I live on Lincoln Avenue. I'm a Ward 3 resident. I've lived in Ward 3 for 16 years, and of all that time, been a member, proud member of the co-op. We do our weekly grocery shopping at the co-op, so I have great respect and appreciation for the co-op in our city. We even used to run to the former one in Silver Spring on occasion when it was there. So I don't think that that's the issue. I think that the issue is that a parking lot is not a vibrant community space, and I'm longing for that. Similar to the previous speaker, when we moved here, there were businesses that then left, and it's been hard. And I've watched my 16-year-old grow up and not have a community space. We newly have the bakery at the junction, and it's an unbelievable spot for the kids to meet up and to have a positive environment. And that's what I want for the co-op. I think that I've heard some vilifying of the developer, and not that I'm pro-developer, but I think the developer is merely trying to implement what we are asking for. And when I saw the most recent plans plans. They looked amazing. That open space and, again, opportunity for congregation while preserving the co-op. And the co-op, if it moves to a new building, I can't speak, I'm not a business person, but if that's part of the compromise, then it seems to be something worth considering. Again, as a member of the co-op, I would support that. So anyway, I ask the council to vote to move forward with considering another anchor tenant if that is ultimately what needs to happen. My understanding is that the no additional grocery store can even be a part of that plan. So I think that the co-op is inextricably a part of the process regardless. But in order to move forward, we need to consider new tenants. And I would ask the council to keep the development moving forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is William Riker. I'm from Ward 1. I think this is obviously a very complex situation, but it's a situation that also poses a grave threat for the future. If you create an atmosphere where the loudest voice gets their way, I think we're going to see a sharp decline in the recent investment that we've seen in Tacoma Park. The co-op itself is obviously a place that has very high prices, and due to that, I don't think it caters to all of Tacoma Park. I think it has a very specific clientele that is more in the upper middle class socioeconomic range. I think because of that, letting the co-op capture this development is really put in priority the interests of a small group of residents rather than a development that would benefit all residents. And it's for that reason that I'm asking that the City Council let the development move forward with or without the co-op.
I'm Monica Jansen. I'm in Ward 1. I'm late to this issue, so I've really been kind of a pain in the butt to people repeating things that had been said 6 months ago, 12 months ago. But my understanding is that the co-op, this all started when the co-op wanted to expand, and it wanted to expand so it could buy in larger quantities so its prices could be cheaper. And then things kind of got out of control. And I'm concerned about what developing that space would mean. I think the task force estimated that the underground parking would be like $40,000 per space. I might be wrong on that. And my understanding of that space is that to really develop it, you have to dig down and maybe it's just secondary to put in underground parking because that excavation would have to be done anyway. So to me, this looks like a very expensive project. And then there has to be revenue to pay for that project. And I don't see how creating underground parking for more cars and then having to come up with the revenue for it is consistent with having more affordable food in the neighborhood. I think things have gotten out of control, and I think it should be slowed down and reconsidered.
Good evening. My name is Chris Bassett. I live on Boyd Avenue with my daughter Selah and my wife Amaya. She wanted to be here tonight but was feeling sick, but the two of us are here to represent. And we would like to also speak out strongly in support of moving ahead with development with the opportunity to find a new anchor tenant if necessary. This process has been very long, full of consideration, frustration, but full of opportunity for dialogue with the community, with the co-op, for input from all parties, and for 5 going on 6 months of negotiation for a letter of intent. I was amused. We came when the decision was made to move ahead with the development agreement, and I thought it would be great to be involved at that time, and then I realized I've got this kid to deal with. We've got things like police reform and women's rights and other things that I needed to be a higher priority. And it's frustrating to come back 6 months later and see that we're still at this stage. I heard one speaker mention that they felt surprised, they felt something was sprung on them at the last minute, that they learned about the developer's single plan. But I did my homework coming to this meeting, and I saw that, in fact, in that letter, the developer offered 3 different plans, in which having a new building was one, maintaining the existing building was another, and having a cojoined space was another. And I've seen throughout my observation of the process and through the various documents I've read from all parties that it's been a continuing iteration of offering option after option. And finally, yesterday, literally at the last minute, the co-op offers to make a concession. And I appreciate their willingness to finally compromise, but there was a clear deadline in sight. This was a well-established timeline and process, and it was well clear that this time was coming, and the process shouldn't be held hostage any further by a group of citizens that can afford to buy stuff at the co-op. For the folks that are worried about getting groceries late at night, I encourage you to go to Shoppers or go to Safeway. They're open till midnight. You can get whatever you need. And the co-op is great, but the co-op will get to maintain its presence there. It can even be involved in negotiations further. But it should not be allowed to make the citizens pay tens of thousands of dollars, drag this process on any further, and miss the opportunity for development of a space that right now is going to waste, and a space that could be used for adults with developmental disabilities, for new retail that can reach a wider citizenry. We encourage the council to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Janice Totham Davies, Poplar Avenue. I thoroughly support the co-op. I've lived here for 16 years and I use the co-op several times a week. I'm wondering why you're all advocating new business space on Carroll Avenue when there is loads of business space that is not taken up. The new development by Busboys and Poets. There's only the Busboys and Poets and an ATM in that block. That's all there is, and it's been there a while. There's all this empty space. Bad Wolf's old shop, Big Bad Wolf's old shop is empty. There is a huge development has been built next to the CVS. There is space, retail space, all over the place in Tacoma Park and on Carroll Avenue. Down there is space between the Spring Mills Bakery and the Vet. The turnover of the shops there is amazing. They don't stay there very long because no one goes to them. Why you want more retail space is beyond me. I've seen no questions about the Tacoma Junction traffic, which is dreadful at best and impossible in rush hour. How do you propose to keep the traffic flowing while large building trucks and men with materials are pulling in and out of that space right in between two sets of traffic lights all day long while this proposed project is being done? How is the co-op meant to receive its deliveries while the project is going on in their tiny car park when there are customers parked there? How is the fire brigade going to do their job when they want to turn right out of the fire station onto Carroll and building trucks are blocking their path, trying to get in and out of the building site? How will the buses manage to stop outside the building site if they choose to close the sidewalk, which they will, because these big building projects do? I'm well acquainted with living next door to building sites, and it is a misery and goes on for months and months. This will be years. I suggest that you put this building project to a vote of all Tacoma Park citizens, not just the council. I don't see why you should be just voting on it and not the rest of us. I think this project is ill-conceived. We will have a permanent problem of delivery trucks, waste and recycling, collectors, residents, if part residential, trying to drive in and out of the site, and waste from the site. Where is the runoff from this lot going to go? The unnecessary building project will make it an absolute misery to shop at the co-op, and I predict that the co-op will lose much of its customer base to Whole Foods while it's going on. It will not be able to put its produce outside as it does in the summer. Has the mayor or anyone on the council who voted for this project actually ever lived next to a building site?
Thank you.
Okay, Ron Davies, Ward 3. It's clear some folks think it's time to move ahead, as they put it, in development of Tacoma Junction. They seek to portray the co-op as pointlessly obstructionist and themselves as the souls of reason. The council, for instance, has assured us that, quote, none of the proposals have the co-op leaving the development site. That evidently has changed, and that's interesting. Anyway, it's blazingly obvious the fastest way to kill a retail establishment is to make it difficult for customers to get to it. Yet this will be unavoidable for the entire time the planned construction is going on. Anybody who doubts this should consider the fate of Big Bad Wolf. On a construction site for years and now moved inside another store where few people would even look for it. Who knows how long it will survive now? It would be interesting to know how many who are pushing the development of Tacoma Junction actually regularly shop at the co-op, as do my wife and I. I'd like to take such a poll. I'd also like to take another poll of the proponents of the development to see how many have lived on a construction site. Jan and I have lived through this twice, once for the massive renovation of the house next door, then for the construction of the lot next to that, which could and should have been eventually an extension of Circle Woods Park. But in Tree City and Azalea City, trees were cut down and azaleas were destroyed for a needless house. And more trees will come down due to damage to the roots. Clearly, we're no longer either Tree City nor Azalea City. Yet not only are the proponents of the planned development disingenuous about the consequences to the co-op of the construction, but when and if the glorious plans are finally realized, there will be dramatically more traffic. In fact, sizable underground parking garages are planned. Can anyone seriously allege the cars coming out of those garages will not make a crowded junction, Carroll and 410, even more crowded, and that it will be harder on a permanent basis to get to the co-op? The plan for the development is just one more sign Tacoma Park is turning its back on what has made it unique and appealing. It's now a walkable city. The co-op is another special feature of Tacoma Park. But with these plans, there will be exponentially more traffic. This is unavoidable. Both residential and retail development is planned. Most of those residents will have cars, and the retail stores will need traffic from outside Tacoma Park. The only reasonable conclusion seems to be the proponents of this plan are doing so in a heedless drive to increase the tax base. Yet proponents of the development seek to pressure opponents to sign on in principle to the development even before a traffic study is done. That's the most important thing. It should be obvious to any thinking person this is the classic case of putting the cart before the horse. Any well-done traffic study will reveal a virtually certain huge increase in congestion, and there should be no pressure on anybody to okay anything before the study is done. Thank you.
Hi, Keith Berner, proud resident of Ward 5. Thank you for being here, Jarrett, and everybody. I'm ideologically about as anti-development, anti-corporate development as many people at Tacoma Park. I'm not against this project. In fact, I'm in favor of it. We've had a blight in the center of Tacoma Park for a very long time. Co-op is a dear institution that's extremely important to us, and it exists right now in a desert. It's time to move forward, and I also, of course, have to note that this process, which I think has been really well run, has tried to solicit co-op input often. And what we're hearing from the co-op is largely an atomic structure. That is, what we are now is all that we can be, and if you change it at all, it's catastrophic. I heard that kind of justification years ago where it was the developer making that argument, believe it or not, and that was when Folger Pratt had planned a huge expansion on the Washington Adventist Hospital lot, and they wouldn't negotiate because they declared that any change to what their position already was would ipso facto make the deal untenable. So this reminds me of that. Tacoma Park can progress. Tacoma Park can develop within bounds. I don't see bounds being broken here, and I see the potential of a real benefit and added resource for the whole community. I do sympathize with those who will be living next door to it. People live next door to everything. Somebody does. And not everybody is in an advantageous position because of it. But ultimately, the public good needs to be the primary factor in this decision. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Dubb, and I'm a bit of an interloper because I live on the Washington, D.C. side of the line at Eastern and Holly. But I thought I'd comment for a couple reasons. One, I was on the Tacoma Junction Task Force many years ago. And as you may recall, that Citizen Committee that did interviews of over 100 residents, had multiple community meetings, basically came up with a proposal that talked about expanding the co-op, creating community space, and redeveloping the Tacoma Junction with the expansion of the co-op being the primary goal. So at some level, we've lost track of what started this process. So I think that's important to remember. The other point, and I was a former board member of the co-op, and I'm still a member of the co-op, but something, I don't have the numbers on me, but I would say something like 40% of Takoma Park households, maybe even more, are member owners of this business. So it's not exactly a special interest in the way that some folks have portrayed it. I dare say that there are more people who shop regularly at TPSS Co-op than voted in the city council elections, for example. So, so I think, if the co-op is not properly, serving certain segments of the community, it's a democratic organization. There are ways to get people elected to the board of directors of the TPSS co-op, like I used to be on it, to change that. So, I mean, this is your institution, and I think that's been lost in the discussion. It's being treated as some obstinate private business, and that's not accurate. That's not what it is. It's a community-based institution. All the profits stay within the city of Takoma Park, and of course in the salaries of the people who work there, who are mostly local residents, and that asset could be lost if you make the wrong moves as a city council.
Hi, I'm Keith Kozloff. I live at 6904 Sycamore. Of course, I'm disappointed the parties haven't yet come to agreement on the non-binding LOI. It seems like if the goal was to reach an agreement, then having to resolve wording on a legally and technically dense 30-page LOI by the deadline imposed kind of a high bar on the parties. And I have to wonder if there might have been a less legally and less expensive path to the two parties reaching their current negotiating positions. But at this point, I guess I'd urge the council to authorize NDC to move ahead with the redevelopment. That would preserve the momentum to redevelop the junction while not precluding the co-op from still becoming an anchor tenant if the two parties are able to still reach agreement before NDC finds another anchor tenant. And I also think the city-owned lot is too valuable a community asset to continue using it for its present use for the 18-wheelers, even receiving some payment from the co-op for that use. So what's ironic is that whether or not the co-op is ultimately part of the redevelopment, the two parties are still going to have to coordinate with each other to some extent, but with a less favorable outcome than if they are able to reach agreement. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Carter Doherty, 6 Crescent Place in Ward 1. I'd ask for a little extra time, but I will try to use as little as possible. I first wanted to say I don't see our official peace delegate here, but I hope somebody said come to the Women's March on January 21st. We need everyone to resist the amoral extremist who is about to move into the White House on January 20th. We have strong institutions in this country. That doesn't mean they don't need our constant support in the coming years. As you know, I work with a group which we've called Revitalize Takoma, and I'm late, by the way, because I had a fender bender out front, which is why I'm rubbing my neck. And with each passing day, our side does not want this less. We want it more. I've heard sometimes the politics of Takoma Park being described as the politics of the last person standing, and I think the turnout here tells you something about the fact that we're resolved to see this through. There are, in fact, people knitting in the audience, which gives you some indication of how prepared some people are to see this project through. They are ready to wait, and if all it means that there will be more hats for this cold winter, then so be it. We urge you to authorize NDC to talk to the other anchor tenants. It's important to note in this process that the co-op absolutely can still be a part of the project, part of the game, if this happens. They can still talk to NDC about being that anchor tenant, but calling on the council to endorse any document between two private parties is entirely inappropriate. That's something they have to work out themselves. Now, earlier today, I took the liberty of emailing Adrian Washington of NDC to be clear on this point, and he acknowledged that not only are they Is it possible for them to continue to talk to the co-op after you would authorize them to talk to other tenants, but they want to do this? We can't make either party sign a deal, but we can't ban them from doing either. And so, let the process play out. You've mapped this out in the development agreement. You've got a good process. It was extended once. It's time to move on. I wanted to end this by noting to you, rather than have a series of people come up here, I collected some comments from some people, and it's been interesting. It's been many people who are not regularly involved with Tacoma Park politics have emailed us asking to relate their desire that the council vote to make this authorization to NDC. Pat Neal and Wahhabi Abadu at 7133 Maple, Elise Covington at 7312 Trescott, Linda Kolko, she's been here now and again, 117 Sherman, Jessica Snowden on Hudson Avenue, really a variety of wards here. The Ellen Zavian, 14 Sherman Avenue, she was also on the Tacoma Junction Task Force. But John Godfrey at 1001 Heather Avenue wrote something to me. I urge the City Council to allow negotiations to begin with another potential anchor store. Bluntly, if maintaining the co-op at its current location is truly important to the co-op, it will begin to negotiate more seriously, but others should be allowed to step in if that doesn't happen. That was in response to something that's been noted up here, which was dropping a lengthy document at the last minute here. All for a document that at the end is non-binding, whether it's 1 page or 38 pages. I think that's a really valuable point to make. So I conclude, short of the time I asked for, please vote to authorize the developer that you chose to talk to other anchor tenants. This continues a process that can still result in the co-op moving into an expanded store, but doesn't have to. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Simmons. I live on Elm Avenue. I am a relative newcomer to Tacoma Park, though I've had friends here for decades, and I'm very familiar with the co-op, and I use it multiple times each week now. I want to speak out essentially in support of the co-op. I feel like there has been some mischaracterization of their positions as intransigent and uncooperative. And I just want to remind the council and the audience that for a long time, and since the negotiation period over this level of intent was started, there's been a big push by the developer for his so-called preferred solution, which involved the developer taking over the Turner building against the wishes of the Matthew family. So that was a non-starter right there. And that accounts for a great deal of the time that's been spent on this. Now, I don't allege that people have bad intentions. I think people are very well intentioned. It's natural for a developer and a council looking for more revenue to come up with the most, great plan they can think of. But with the traffic situation in that area, it seems more reasonable to have a smaller scale development than what's been envisioned. And, I can understand if the council votes to move forward with a different anchor tenant, but I think it should seriously consider walking away from this deal and going back to the original vision from a few years ago about a smaller scale development. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Miller. I live on Montgomery Avenue behind the co-op. I've been a co-op member for 20 years. You've heard from me repeatedly ever since the ill-conceived RFP basically excluded the co-op from development on this plot. You know that I'm concerned about traffic. You know that I'm very concerned about a Columbia Avenue commercial egress, which I think would be a nightmare. And overall, it's not clear to me what's wrong with the parking lot if the developer can't squeeze enough money out of this small plot, considering that there is a glut of empty retail spaces, as has been pointed out. So yes, I would say go back to square one or leave it as it is if we can't come to an agreement. Specifically, I want to just make a strong objection to the misconception that's been mentioned a couple of times by other people here that the co-op is for rich people. I'm there several times a week. I can only think those people have never been there. The bulk products are cheap, and there is published evidence to that effect. Both the employees and the shoppers are the most socioeconomically diverse in the city, in what is probably the most vibrant business in the city. And the expensive products are expensive because they support small local farmers and local prepared food purveyors, and because they choose products based on the highest ethical and environmental policies. And that is not something we're going to get in an alternative anchor tenant, because the co-op is in fact unique. It has co-evolved with Takoma Park over the last 20 years since I've been here. If we lose the co-op in this process, we lose the heart of the community. Please don't let that happen.
Colleen Cordes, 500 New York Avenue. Thank you so much for representing us and dealing with this really difficult choice. I can see just from what's on paper, published online, that the developer and the co-op have both struggled very hard to come up with something that works for both of them. But it appears that the developer cannot make the money that his company needs to make while also accommodating the co-op's needs for reasonable parking and loading. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that the council can go forward with the developer seeking another anchor tenant and think that's not going to be a problem for the co-op. Because if they haven't been able to reach some way of making this work yet, it's even less likely that the co-op will end up with reasonable accommodations for loading and parking when they're no longer part of the development. Please, let's not kid ourselves. This is a hard choice, but better to make it tonight. The co-op is really, I just want to agree with the positive things that have been said about the co-op, and including the prices. You get what you pay for in this world, and if socially and ecologically we've not figured that out yet, it's about time in 2017. So I just really urge you that you make the tough choice. I appreciate how hard the developer has worked on this and how hard the co-op has, but it just doesn't, it seems like too big of a too large scale for such a small lot. And it sounds like even the fire chief has some concerns about whether fire trucks, if there was a lay-by there, as the co-op has said, they'd be willing to accept that. But if there was a lay-by there, and buses are pulling over there, and trucks are pulling over there, and a truck has to wait behind another truck that's already there, how are the emergency vehicles going to get by, let alone the rest of the traffic? Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Shannon Earl. I live on Grant Avenue in Ward 1, and I've been a resident of Takoma Park for 15 years and a member of the co-op since pretty much my first day here. I love the co-op. I shop there, and I also love Takoma Park, and I think it's been enormously exciting to see the development that's happened in Takoma Park in the last few years, to see our city changing. And things do change, and change can be scary, but change can be really exciting and good. And I think the Junction has been in need of development for a long time, and would urge the council to move forward with that process and not to lose the ground that's already been made and the work that's been done. And I hope sincerely that things can be worked out with the co-op and they can continue to thrive in that location, but I don't think we should hold back a unique and exciting development opportunity for Takoma Park because of it. So thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Abdi Guled, and those of you who don't know me, I am the Takoma Park Food Co-op General Manager. So I'm the person who run that organization. And if you want to know, my bosses are not only the board members. I have 9,000 members. Most of you who sit in here are my bosses. And I want to clarify tonight a few things. I hear many times about the co-op is too expensive to shop. I'm a father of 4 young, beautiful girls. And every day when I come to the co-op, I look for how people can afford to shop, whether people who work or the people for the community. And I urge you, please, everyone who are thinking the co-op is too expensive, please come see me, because I go to Whole Foods every other day and make sure that the Tacoma Park community can shop the co-op and a competitive pricing. And I promise you, if you find something you cannot afford, go to the website. My email is there, my phone is there, and I will be very happy to sit down and make sure the community can shop here. The co-op employee, over 45 employees, come from 24 different countries. I'm one of them. English is my first language. I hear people saying, I moved to the co-op because, this is where I really want to live this community. Well, guess what? I left Somalia in 1990 for the Civil War, and I've been working the co-op since 1996. So I moved to the co-op from Somalia to Tacoma Park. We're not against for the developers, and a lot of people say, and this has been a long process, but the decision tonight is related to the councilor. And we're not asking any special, but we're asking the council to do the right things. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Tony Camilli. I live on Tulip Avenue, and I picked the worst act to follow because that was really powerful, moving stuff to hear from the manager of the co-op. I just wanted to say that I want to commend you all for the work you've done, as well as your predecessors. A lot of your predecessors who are not on the council, or a few of them are not on the council anymore, are part of that work, and I think that this is important work. I live in Ward 1, and your former colleague Seth Grimes recently sent out something, which was a news article from 1995 about expansion of the junction, believe it or not. It was in the news in 1995, and I thought that was quite humorous because the article highlighted the fact that the city received a grant from the state and the governor in order to kind of kick off this development, because they saw the future. The state, the governor's office saw the future of what the junction could be. And here we are 20 plus years later talking about what the future of the junction could be. And I think it has a good future. And with or without the co-op, I think it has a good future. And I think a lot of other people have pointed out very astutely that this is not necessarily about dollars and cents. This is a community asset, and it belongs to the entire community and not just to those who patronize the co-op, of which I am one of those. Since they started offering beer, I'm a regular customer because that's my food of choice.
Yes.
But I will say that whether or not the co-op and NDC can come up with an agreement, in my mind, isn't really the point. The point here is that this is a taxpayer-owned property, a city-owned property, and it should be done and redeveloped for the benefit of the city. And I personally think that the junction and some of the empty storefronts could change as a result of this development, and I think that's the hope of the council in the sense of the people who are in the task force as well. There's a lot of good that can come from it. But, in some ways, development begets more development. And, business begets more business, and foot traffic, and all those things are related. And there's a lot of synergies involved. And this blight that exists at the junction currently just is really a bad spot on that whole development, or that whole area. So I implore you to move forward with or without the co-op as in a letter of intent, although I certainly hope that they come to the table and do sign a letter of intent with NDC. One idea I've thought of floating is maybe you just remove that provision and amend the agreement so that the developer can seek any anchor tenant. That might move the parties closer together. Just a thought. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Tiba Wasafa. I live at 7720 Carroll Avenue. I want to share a personal story. About 2 years prior to the time the city council assigned the task force, and inspired by the temporary housing the fire department had, I had this vision of putting an African cottage coffee shop on the parking lot. And as a model to be duplicated in a specialty coffee market nationwide, which is a sector that's growing, which is a sector that's $100 billion. I've positioned my vision in a $6 billion market. but I need an iconic model. And Tacoma Park is where I conceived it, and Tacoma Park is where I want to build it. Tacoma Park is where I dreamt it. And I spent about $700. I hired an architect and submitted a proposal to build a little coffee cottage shop on that lot. I was told it's a public property and there has to be a public process. I was delighted. And I saw the city working, putting together a task force. I saw the task force working hard, and they came up with a reasonable, doable recommendation. Here we are now. I'm still waiting anxiously. I'm about to die waiting for this place to happen. And what I'd like to remind you, this is a city where a lot of people live. All our aspirations have to come together. I love the co-op. Every time I go there, I see my brothers and sisters working. I want the co-op to stay there. Not at the expense of me dying, you know. And today I came to urge, when I looked at that proposed plan, I wish he had Blessed Coffee on it. You know, I was so jealous. Mine was like a coffee, maybe some coffee shop. It is an anchor institution in that elegant space. And I am really impressed by what NDC, by the way, I don't know how many of you have gone to NDC and talked to this fine gentleman. They're not developers. They're Neighborhood Development Corporation, a small firm. Have you talked to them? Don't just vilify them. Don't just call them developers. By the way, co-op is for profit. They are for profit, and development has to be a sustainable economic equation. But the point I'm trying to make here, this is a public property. It belongs to all of us. Do you know the population of Tacoma Park is 39% African American? Do you know how many Africans live in Tacoma Park? Do you know what they aspire to do? Do you know they are dying for an economic opportunity? I get offended when I hear people say, what is development? Come on. This is a public property. We all have to get along. We all have to compromise. We all have to give our little dream a chance to prosper. Please do not say no development, because you're really, really offending me. Thank you, and I hope the co-op will come to the table, because I want the co-op, but I'd like to have my little coffee shop there. And thank you very much, Washington area, for the hard work you're doing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bruce Williams, 326 Lincoln Avenue. And I just want to speak to what you are going to be voting on tonight. You have two options. One, to go forward and continue with NDC and give them the opportunity to talk to additional anchor tenants, but also to continue talking with the co-op. And I think that's the only really viable option that you have at this point. The other option is to stop the process that's been going on, this process for 3 years, and as somebody just recently referred to, process that started at least in 1995. I'd say that the process started before then. It started back in the 80s. But at least in the 1995 process, I was part of the council that worked to make that happen and to bring the co-op to the city of Tacoma Park and to facilitate them getting money from the state to do that. So I think you really only have one choice, and I think you should vote to go ahead. And I know that NDC wants to continue to talk to the co-op, and I know the co-op wants to continue to talk to NDC. I was intrigued at the end of Marilyn Berger's comments where she said that the co-op had signed an LOI. I'm assuming that that's the LOI that is the latest version that they submitted. If it's a version that the two parties have come to together, nobody has really spoken to that. So I'm assuming because of that it's only the one that they last submitted. So again, I urge you to go forward, keep this process moving. It's been a good process, and I commend you. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Howard Cohn, and as Bruce says, lived here for 35 years with my wife Diana, and as Bruce says, this conversation goes back at least 35 years. And I appreciate everything that's been said tonight, because it's part of that same conversation, and at some point it seems like an endless conversation. I've been involved in at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 attempts to make something happen in that parking lot at the junction. A couple were led by the city, a couple led by citizen groups. One involved the state. And nothing happened. Nothing came of any of those attempts. So it's exciting now, after almost 35 years, to be on the verge. And I hope you go forward. I hope you make something happen.
Yeah. How do you do? I'm Richard Levine. I'm at 7420 Cedar Avenue. I've been a resident of this community, and I stress community, for over 30-some years. And the reason I say community is because we're a special community and we have values that we promote. That's why we are a community. We're not a development company, and we have to determine what our values are. And one of the chief values of this community is the cooperative spirit of the co-op. And I think in any project we have to prioritize what our values are. The co-op should be the #1 priority. That's what makes this a community, not just development. Any development can occur anywhere, in any city, in any way, shape, or form, and we've seen it. But the co-op is a unique asset. It gives the heart and soul to Tacoma Park. And if we don't promote the co-op and protect the co-op, we may gain some development, but we'll lose the heart and soul of this community. So make this our priority. The co-op is the priority, not development. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to begin by recognizing Ward 2 Councilman for his son's performance in the Piney Branch Orchestra this evening.
And you for yours.
It was a lovely community event just next door. I live on Columbia Avenue on the street behind the co-op. I'm a co-op member. I've been involved in this process for at least 2.5, possibly going on 3 years now. And I share the positive vision for increasing the values that everyone talks so passionately about this community. And one of the values is community. And one of the ways you create community is by walking and bumping into your neighbors. And one of the ways you walk and bump into your neighbors is by having things to walk to. And we certainly see that in the vibrant, historic downtown area as that has redeveloped, and you have places like Ace Hardware and a number of other institutions that have come in, and you bump into your neighbors. And way back, we talked about the, quote, bump factor of that community building. And, you know, Tacoma Park was built, it was developed by B.F. Gilbert, a developer, right? And so by the nature of that term is not evil per se. And I think anyone who's watched this proceeding with an open mind and saw the presentation from NDC whenever a few weeks ago was quite astounding, really. The creativity they brought, the other tenants to the Ability product they brought into this project in a collaborative fashion. The offer to build the co-op a brand new LEED custom certified building right next door to their current building to provide them complete continuity of operations, which was for 2 years all they talked about, because they said we are the only store. It's critical that we have complete continuity. And so now they're being offered complete continuity at expense to the developer by letting them stay in that building, in their original building, and hopefully they might negotiate with the Turner family. That's not my business. But these are pretty extraordinary concessions. And yes, there's a loading dock issue, but as we saw a few weeks ago, they currently have to unload their 18-wheelers and cart their goods 55 feet. And this could be 55 feet too, depending on where they make the door into it. And I don't think that it's about 25 feet difference. There's something else going on. I don't know what it is. I want the co-op to thrive. I think it's a vital part of this community, but it's not the only part of this community. And it should not hold up the development for the benefit of all members of this community. And you know, I just encourage you to continue with the process. It has been a process. We talk about institutions. It's been a transparent process. You have showed tireless patience for people like me and the folks in this room tonight, coming up and sharing our opinions, and that's what public comment is, and you've taken it. And I think that whatever decision you make tonight has to be and is an informed one based on the whole element of the entire community. So thank you for your time.
My name is Denny May. I live at 7322 Willow Avenue. Thank you for allowing me to testify here. So what this one individual citizen sees is a city council in the most strongly Democratic voting city, in one of the most strongly Democratic voting states in the country, and in this bastion of Democratic Party activity, we have a piece of publicly owned land that abuts an anchor food store that many residents can walk to and that sells its products, including healthy, organic food, so successfully that something like 1/3 of the households in this town are or have been members of this food co-op. Oh, and this very successful and popular food co-op has a democratically elected board, small d here, almost unheard of in the food industry. So in this food supply situation that most small towns in this country would love to have, our city council decides to place this entire situation at risk and turn our fate over to an outside developer. A developer who, by the way, as I understand it anyway, constantly shifts its proposals and even tries to buy the co-op's property from under it, out from under it, without informing the co-op. I'm not sure about what all this means. We have a food store that much of the town loves. We have public land, our land, next to the store that can help this store thrive. I think it's time for us to come to our senses and tell NDC to work things out with the co-op or go away and leave us alone. We've spent a ton of money on this project and we've gotten nowhere. We can do other things with the property that will benefit the community, generate some revenue for the city, and be beautiful. Let's recognize the value of what we have and act in a way that is consistent with our values. It may be time for us to consider going back to square one. The city should cancel this project and go back to the work of developing its own plan for this invaluable public property and not let a private developer decide. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments this evening on this voting item? All right, then we will be moving on. If there's public comments on any other issue that people would like to comment on this evening, go ahead, Ms. Machui, if you'd like to. So now we are shifting to public comments, and at this time, people can comment on whatever they need.
Good evening, Council. I wasn't going to speak today, but I thought there's a captive audience. Usually they're not that many. So I said, wow. Gee. I'm going to just put in a word. Mary Jane Machui, Ward 2, founder of Parents with Special Needs Adults. Please, if you all, the citizens of the Tacoma Park and the Council, could spend as much time listening to Parents with Special Needs Adults and to our children, and just a third of the time you spend on the Tacoma Junction and speed humps and street narrowings, that would be great. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments this evening? Okay, then we will move on to council comments. Do my colleagues have anything tonight? Councilmember Mail?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight, and I'll comment on the junction-related issues later. But I wanted to bring up something that I heard in many of your comments, which is the pace of government and the pace of decision-making. I think that issue is relevant both at the local scale, to a project that was on the in the newspaper at least from 1995, and here we are today, 22 years later, talking about it, as well as it is on the national scale. And I challenge you all to think about what does fast government look like? One version of it is it looks like no government. It looks like taking away checks and balances, taking away public participation, taking away environmental protection. But what would it look like to do all those things and still do things fast? What would it look like to take a proposal from residents who were interested in a sidewalk and find a way to make a decision on that sidewalk within a month and build the sidewalk within 2 months after that? What would it look like to talk about development or use of a city-owned property and try to move through public process, planning, design, solicitations of bids in a process so fast that it could be done in a year? And I raise that question because I think that's a challenge that faces all of us as we think about what it means to be in America, what it means to have infrastructure, what it means to move forward faster in the 21st century and not get left behind. And I think in government, and one of the things I've seen on City Council is trying to find a way to do that, to move decision-making and implementation faster while still making sure that people are legitimately listened to and part of the process is one of the sort of fundamental challenges of our day in government at a national level and very much at a local level. And so I just raised that sort of general issue as one of interest because it's relevant to this decision. It's relevant to sidewalks. It's relevant to the hospital site and what happens to that site afterwards, and so many other issues. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to apologize for being late to this evening. General session started in Annapolis, so I was there all day trying to make sure that the city's interests are in front of the senators and delegates as they begin their new session. One thing I would like to mention that, as many of you know, I'm the vice chair of the Legislative Committee, and there will be a bill from MML, Maryland Municipal League, to try to get municipalities, once again, their highway user revenue. So we are very hopeful. We will have more information probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. A priority that the city has is for us to have better relationships with State Highway Administration and the utilities. The chair of the Legislative Committee, Mayor Bridget Newton of Rockville, appointed me to be the chair of a subcommittee that will meet January 26th with the major stakeholders that provide utility service in Maryland so that we can try to work out some type of agreement so we can have better collaboration and notification of utility work, not just in Tacoma Park, but throughout the state of Maryland. So this should be a very important meeting. We're trying to get a memorandum of understanding. If that does not happen this year, we are prepared to request legislation next year from the General Assembly. And Monday is MLK Day here in Tacoma Park. I will be the Master of Ceremonies, and Mayor Stewart will say a few words. So please come out to Tacoma Middle School. If you have the opportunity, bring a dish. It's like a big community party. It's going to start at 5 p.m., and I hope to see all of you there. Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Siemens because he can tell you before going to the potluck celebration in the evening what you can do to volunteer.
And I did that on purpose.
And the mayor just had to say a little more, and I wouldn't even have to talk. Yes, Monday is the celebration, and from 10 until 1 p.m., we're going to do service day projects. There will be opportunities for community members to go out and work in the community. Anyone interested in joining us for some of the daytime activities should contact Howard Cohn at 301-270-8187. It's kind of foolish for me to give you his phone number since everybody knows Howard, but anyways, and then following that, of course, as Councilmember Smith said, at 5 p.m. is going to be a potluck dinner followed by some entertainment. And again, Jared is going to be the MC, and the rest of the council will be serving the food. So please come on out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz.
It's interesting because yesterday I got an email from, actually a text of all things, from Councilmember Siemens wanting to know what I was doing next Monday and what I like to serve. And I said, well, I need to know some information. My day's available, but what's this about? He says, good, I've got you signed up. That was the last I heard from him. So I guess I'm signed up to be serving food, and I'm happy to do that.
And we thank you.
On Martin Luther King's birthday. Praise the Lord for Martin Luther King. In that spirit, I wanted to encourage and follow up on Carter Dougherty's comments about the Women's March. It's coming up the day after the inauguration. Congressman Raskin has sent out an invitation to anybody who is interested in participating in that march. They're having a big breakfast early in the morning, about 7:30 or so, and then everybody's going to get on buses and get transported down to the march. There's going to be a whole lot of people there, and myself and my stepdaughter Denise are going to be there, and it's going to be a memorable day in my life, and I hope some people here will be going. I'm certain that they will. How many of us on the council have plans? Got 3. There's 4 of us, it looks like, at this point in time. I want to wish everybody a happy New Year, and I say that with a great deal of heartfelt feelings, because it was a bad year for the United States of America, in my opinion. The good news around here is that we've got Congressman Raskin in Congress. I think he's a gentleman that's going to change how Congress does business. And we've got Chris Van Hollen in the Senate, and that's a wonderful thing for Maryland, for our country. Beyond that, I'm not too sure what I can be happy about that occurred this past year. The Chicago Cubs won the World Series. And I'm not going to continue with trying to make a list of things. Let's hope somehow or another that 2017 is going to be better. But it is going to be a challenge, and we all know why. I'm not going to name the name of the person who shall not be named. But we all have to get our shoulders to the wheel here and protect our rights, particularly for those that are protected by our sanctuary city status, and to protect human rights, to protect the environment, and so many other things that all of us are anxious to know about, what's going to happen. So that's all I want to say tonight. I don't mean to, I know I'm giving a sermon, but I guess that's my privilege. I'm looking forward to a very active year by the City Council, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Kovar?
I'm following Reverend Schultz, I guess. My voice is a little bad because I have a head cold. So just a couple of quick things, and I'm going to ask the city manager about this. One piece of good news was that our snowstorm this January was very light. However, we live in Tacoma Park, so I did receive numerous questions from constituents about it. And if you could look into 2 things and just circle back with me. One is evidently in the area where we border Silver Spring and North Tacoma, the plows come along from the county and they plow, and then they get to the border and they lift up their plows and drive the rest of the way on our streets. It was reported to me at one point. Anyway, it seems like if they're driving down, they could probably. Which streets? I'll send it to you. Yeah, but that would just be something to look into. I assume we could just work out an arrangement on that. And then the second thing is salt, and of course, this being Tacoma Park, I heard from people who think we use too much and not enough. So I'd just love to get a readout later on how we decide the level in terms of treatment of animals, pre-treating for car safety and pedestrians, et cetera. Thanks.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Thanks, Mayor. Happy New Year, everyone. I just have a couple quick comments. One, I look forward to a better year, like Councilmember Schultz raised. I think it was an emotional night watching President Obama's last speech last night, at least for my family. But it was hopeful, and it's going to be sad to see that good man leave the White House. I and some other good people potentially leaving the White House. I think, but I think based on, actually, you know, the mayor's sort of what to look forward to this year kind of got me excited about what to look forward to in Tacoma Park. I'm sure you all saw it. I sent it out to Ward 3 residents about what to look forward to in 2017, and I hope that you all participate this much throughout the year. The thing that I wanted to raise that Councilmember Schultz reminded me of, and I think Ms. Carpenter can remind me, but there's a group of citizens, and I'm going to be assisting with this event, who selected the date of February 4th. Is that right? Where there will be a half-day event here in this room, which will be co-sponsored by the city on our status as a sanctuary city, its history, and steps moving forward as part of just the movement that's arisen as a result of this recent election. There will be press releases and email blasts that will go out, so make sure you pay attention to the emails, but February 4th is the date. So I'm going to completely do a 180 and talk about something that's not inspiring at all, and that is on Fifth Avenue in Tacoma Park, which is where I reside. There is a home that's under construction, Madam City Manager, that's been under construction for quite some time, that has, you know, during construction they have that Tyvek outside wrapper that goes around, and I guess there's a wind tunnel that comes through there, but I guess they've stalled construction, and now the neighborhood throughout the night hears racketing of the paper flying, and this morning my neighbor and I found pieces of it in our driveway. I don't know, I've tried to reach out to the gentlemen who work there, but they don't really know who they work for, which is kind of weird, but I was hoping you can help us figure out how to resolve that issue, because a few neighbors have brought that to my attention. That is all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. While we're on the roll of looking into things, the stop sign on Poplar and is it 4th? The tree is overgrown again, 4th. And I almost went through it today. I just like, so we need to get it fixed soon. I just want to take a moment to thank some residents, particularly Nadine Block and Jen Wofford and others. I'm just going to name them, but there are many people who are involved in the Tacoma Park mobilization effort. And I just want to say that they have really done an amazing job organizing, putting together committees, doing trainings, and I encourage everyone to try and get involved in that. And I have another announcement. The Tacoma Ensemble is going to be partnering with Casa de Maryland on Saturday, January 25th. So if you do go to the march and are looking for something to do that Saturday evening at 7:30 at the Church of the Ascension on Sligo Avenue in Silver Spring, they are going to be doing a concert with commentary in both English and Spanish, and then having a conversation afterwards about immigration. And Mr. I think there was well, I'm not going to say it because I'll say it wrong. Anyway, that is an event on January 21st if you'd like to attend that. And then the final thing is tomorrow night for all Blair High School parents. If you are listening, don't forget that the PTSA meeting is tomorrow night at the fire station restaurant in Silver Spring. So, that's that. All right. City manager comments.
Like many of you, Happy New Year. And just kind of wanted to let people know that staff is getting underway of budget preparation. So just as the council started with its budget retreats and thinking about that, we're also going full force now into the budget prep process. Wanted to follow up from the last council meeting in December that on bike share balancing, Mayor Stewart noted that the bike share station at the junction had no bikes for use at 8 a.m. We did contact Bike Share, and they said that they have corrected the situation by rebalancing. If you see some issue with it, please let us know. Today I attended a meeting on tax duplication in Rockville at the invitation of County Councilmember Sidney Katz. Also present there was somebody from Rockville, friend from Gaithersburg, and the new person who kind of took over Jacob Sesker's role, Gene Smith. And he was open to working with us. Basically, I summarized that there had been kind of informal agreements on a large portion of the tax duplication discussions, and that's just not been kind of noted and shared with others. So we're going to be compiling that and getting that word out, and then identifying kind of what are the outstanding issues to focus on. There will be a discussion or kind of an overview of that on January 19th, next Thursday at the chapter meeting. We're not going to have a lot of details there, but I think they'll talk about it again. The goal at this point is to try to focus the areas that still need to be worked on for FY19 budget. So recognizing that it's not going to be for this year. I volunteered, but I'm also kind of pleased that I'm taking the lead on that. So, leaf collection went very well. Didn't receive very many complaints, which is wonderful. The one thing we were going to adjust was the Small Business Saturday pickup. And just also, you've mentioned Martin Luther King's holiday. Both Sunday and Monday, our facilities here are closed. And as has been mentioned, it's a day on, not a day off for most of us. Just a couple kudos. We had a holiday party for staff, and many council members came. It seems like a long time ago, but it was a really nice one. And really appreciate council members coming there. Even though there was very little program, the staff sees it, and they're really happy to know that the council is enjoying the togetherness that we had. And also just wanted to give a kudo to Karen McPherson, who's been making her presence known in the Washington Post recently, both with her holiday book list about hope and inspiration, how to kind of give hope in the 2017. And also today she had a review of a biography of Margaret Wise Brown. It was very interesting. So it's nice to see her always out there. That's all I have. You have questions?
Any questions for the city manager? No? Okay, Councilmember Smith.
The tax duplication, review at the MML chapter meeting. Will Councilmember Katz be there?
Yes, I believe he will be.
And will the new attorney, Mr. Smith, be there?
I'm not sure if he will or not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. All right. I'm going to say I did not review the minutes, so we're going to push that off for. All right. Okay, we'll move on to our first voting session. The first is a resolution affirming the Green Team priorities. Just to quickly review for folks, the City Council met with the Committee on the Environment as the Green Team on October 3rd. We reviewed priorities, and then those were revised, and we reviewed them again in a work session on November 30th here at a council meeting. And we are now going to consider a resolution affirming those priorities. So these are things that we've discussed before. Would someone like to move this resolution?
So moved.
Councilmember Mail, a second by Councilmember Smith. Any discussion? No? I would just like to extend my thanks to all the hard work by the Committee on the Environment in putting this together. I will also say that when the council met Monday night to talk about our overall priorities, we discussed just kind of lifting these and incorporating them into our overall priorities so they matched up. So with that, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes. Next, we have a resolution providing for an appointment to the Tacoma Junction Community Consultation Process Advisory Committee. We had someone who had to leave the committee, so this is a replacement. Does the Deputy City Manager have anything to say on this at all, or? No? Okay.
I would like to move it.
All right, Councilmember Siemens moves. Second?
Second.
I'm going to give it to Councilmember Schultz. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're now going to move on to a work session, a discussion of proposed Tacoma Park Scholarship Program for Montgomery College students. I want to thank the representatives from Montgomery College for being here this evening and sitting through all our public comments. And this is something that we discussed during our last budget. It was on a reconciliation item that we put into our budget. And I don't know if the city manager wanted to discuss any more. The deputy, sorry.
Sure, I can speak to it. At the beginning of last year, about a year ago now, in January, when Council was establishing their priorities, one of them was focused on youth success, and they used decisions that came out of that retreat to inform budget decisions a few months later when we were preparing the budget and you all were preparing the budget for the current fiscal year. As part of those discussions, and it was put forth originally by Councilmember Smith, $5,000 was set aside in the current fiscal year budget to be used for scholarships for a scholarship or scholarships for college students. And subsequently, you all had a meeting and public discussion with Dr. Pollard from Montgomery College. And in those discussions, you learned a lot more about the needs of students who attend Montgomery College. Following that, there were conversations amongst some council members about possibly using the $5,000 that had been set aside to provide scholarships for Montgomery College students. And so we put together an agenda item for you all to consider. And essentially what we're asking tonight is whether or not you as a council want to provide those funds to Montgomery College to be administered to students at the college, and if so, what you would like the preferences or the criteria to be for the award of those scholarships. There will be a resolution before you next week that includes the criteria or preferences that you all decide on if you indeed decide to move forward with providing those funds to the university. I was in contact with of the college. I was in contact with representatives of the college who I spoke with and ultimately put together some criteria that I thought would be good for your consideration. They said that they recommended that the $5,000 be broken up into 5 $1,000 scholarships so that could be spread across 5 students. And the criteria that I've put in the agenda item for your consideration is that the student qualifies for financial need as determined by FAFSA. The student resides in Tacoma Park, and actually we didn't have an opportunity to revise the language in this, but based on your discussion the other night at the retreat, what is before you, it says student is a resident of Tacoma Park, and we want to make it clear that the criteria is actually it's somebody who lives or resides in Tacoma Park, and there's no citizenship requirement either in the city or the U.S. Third, there is a preference for students in the ACES program at Montgomery College, and that is a program that works with high school students to prepare them for college life and the academic rigors of college at Montgomery College. And finally, a criteria for meeting a minimum GPA of 2.5. So with all that said, the discussion that we'd like you all to have tonight and the direction is whether or not you want us to proceed with working with Montgomery College, and if you think that these preferences in terms of criteria need to be revised or adjusted before a resolution goes before you next week for a vote.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dan Weber, for the presentation. I'm a huge supporter of making sure that we provide scholarships to our young people in the city. I can't say that I was the one who originated this idea. Our state senators and delegates do this already in District 20. But I wanted to find a way so we could drill down and impact more residents of Tacoma Park. I think the criteria that have been laid out are great. I just hope that, you know, the stories that are told during the application process, if we can, you know, look for those people that are first generation going to college and try to help them, because a lot of them have, you know, more difficulty than others who have already gone through this process. So I hope my colleagues join me and push this forward. And another thing is I hope the city talks about this because I want our other municipalities in Montgomery County to do the same. You know, there are wealthy cities like Rockville and Gaithersburg that would have no problem providing $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 scholarships. So I would hope that we can push them in the same direction that we are leading on this issue. And I think this would be probably the first municipality in Montgomery County that offers this type of scholarship for its local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mail?
Yeah, thank you. I'm supportive of the program. The one thing that I'm commenting on is the sentence that precedes the 4 criteria in the document, noting that they may be preferences or they may be requirements. I think the residents, the living in Tacoma Park criteria should be a mandatory one. I think the preference for ACEs, preference for the GPA makes sense as preferences. And I guess my sense is that I would want the financial assistance to also be a requirement, the need for financial assistance. But that one's a little bit more open-ended. But I think we want to be clear whether they're preferences or requirements. And from my perspective, in the first year, certainly of the program, focusing on youth who are from Tacoma Park is a good way to start it off.
Councilmember Kovar?
Thank you. I'm also a strong supporter of the work that the college does to educate, in particular, people from this area who are low income or from immigrant communities. And I'm pleased that we have some of the leadership of the college in the audience today, so it's great to see them. We're going to be engaging in some focused conversations later about the building program there, but I think this is something that is an easy thing to support. As they know, my wife and I have been involved in supporting scholarships at MC previously, so I think this is a great addition. I agree with Councilmember Mail about the residency and financial need. And the one other question I had, and this isn't something that I would insist on, but just something to think about, because I think the way that Councilmember Smith had originally talked about this was it might be sort of spread around a little bit within the city. So I don't know if there's a way to sort of ensure that, I'm not saying from Ward 1, but just that in general that it would be, people could be selected from different parts of the city if they met these requirements, as a, not a requirement, but a preference. So toss that out there.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Thanks, Mayor. I want to join my colleagues and give strong support to this. I'm reminded as Dr. Stewart is sitting here that I owe him a call and need to reschedule a tour with him that I could not make. So I will be in touch with you, Dr. Stewart. I agree with Councilmember Mail and Kovar. I think since we are using city funds and we have a number of students who reside here and or future students that reside here, that the requirement of residing here should be something that's required. As Councilmember Smith raised the MLK event on Monday, I'm reminded about a year ago, this upcoming Monday, the keynote speaker at the MLK event was a Montgomery College student who was undocumented, who talked about how Montgomery College and the education it provided, helped him get to where he is today, and it's private scholarships and Montgomery College's support. And he's a very successful young man today, and it brings so many things together in 2017 and the positive outlook that we've talked about and the rhetoric that's out there. So I strongly support this, and I hope we can get strong support on the council as well. Thanks.
Councilmember Schultz?
I too think this is an outstanding idea, and I have several reasons for saying that. And I also, by the way, do happen to agree that we do need to make sure that this is mandatory to city residents. That on December 20th, I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Stewart, who's the provost and vice president of the Silver Spring campus, Tacoma Silver Spring campus, to tour the K-Fritz Center, which I had never been in, which is an art center. But it's also where what the college calls the Refugee Center, where they provide classes in English and also a lot of technology classes simultaneously. They teach the language and the technology that the student is interested in, whether it's nursing or auto mechanics or something like that, at the same time, because they both facilitate the learning of the other. And so I toured a number of rooms in that building. It's a giant space, no pun intended, because it used to be the home of Giant Foods Bakery many years ago. And so it's a building that's built to last. It'll be there after the Third World War. It was fascinating how much I learned, including the fact that there's all these art studios that apparently are heavily used during the day, during the weeks when classes are in session. And Dr. Stewart and I sort of kicked around the idea is, gosh, we have one room in the entire city of our public space for arts education, and here a quarter-mile away there's this huge building full of art students and art facilities, and wouldn't it be neat if we could somehow or another link things up? And he and I mean to get together again. I have to remind you of that. You reminded me to remind you of that. One of the things that's germane to this conversation is that there's a credit program which leads to a degree, and there's non-credit instruction, because a lot of students come there, they're not interested or able to consider at the particular point in time involving in the credit courses, and they can switch from one to the other in midstream if they need to. But what's interesting and is germane to this conversation is that students in the credit programs have access to sources of scholarships and Pell Grants and other federal support, whereas students in the non-credit programs, those are just simply like refugees who are just simply learning there to be able to get a toehold on an employment in the United States. There really is no financial support for any of those people available. So I'm wondering if we may want to think about how we apply this program to who gets this money, and whether that can be a preference as well that can be considered, because if there's other financial support available in some for an particular individual, but that keeps them from taking, say, career-oriented training, then that $500 might be able to go a lot farther. And I don't know if this is something we can pursue, but I just wanted to point that out as an interesting thing to take into account. The question that I have is who will, and I'll ask this of you, has there any thought been given to who will be doing the selecting of those or the identification of candidates for these scholarships?
The idea is for us to turn the money over to Montgomery College with our preferences and criteria, and have them administer the funds. And we would, part of the resolution and the item is that we would ask Montgomery College to let us know the names and contact information of those students who receive the scholarship funds, so that you all know who they are and can recognize them as appropriate.
Okay, Thank you very much.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also support this program. I feel that definitely the student should live in Tacoma Park, that that's more than a preference, but it's a requirement, as Councilmember Mayo suggested, and also that obviously financial need be mandatory. I would just ask that when this comes out that we spell out FAFSA, who is determining the financial need, rather than just use the abbreviation. Thank you.
Great. And I'll just add my support to this and what has been said by my colleagues. And I'm glad this is something we can do on our first meeting back from recess to kick off our 2017. And so I think we're all in agreement in moving forward with this. Do we have enough? Do you have enough direction for the resolution?
Yes, I think we do. And in the interest of getting Montgomery College the funds as quickly as possible so that they can be used for the spring semester, if you could give us direction also to go ahead and get the ball rolling on that, we can have the funds moved over, and then we can establish the criteria in stone next week, and that way the money's where it needs to be so that they can do what they need to do as quickly as possible.
Great. So why don't we just do a hand vote? All those in favor of moving forward with the scholarship, please raise your hand. That is everyone. So move forward, and we look forward to this. So thank you very much for all your work on this. Terrific. All right. Next up is our discussion of the Tacoma Junction redevelopment. I think I'm turning it over to the Deputy City Manager again. Sorry. Yep.
This one.
One of you.
Good evening. So tonight we have a work session and a voting session on the Tacoma Junction Development Project. 3 years ago, in January of 2014, we began this phase of the project. Given the significance of the project involving an unattractive and underutilized city-owned property in the heart of our community, the council and staff have considered issues thoughtfully, have held multiple meetings of different types, have entered into this development agreement with NDC, have shared detailed information via the city's website and other means, and have received and considered a great deal of public comment. Per the terms of the development agreement, NDC was to have submitted a letter of intent with the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Co-op by November 29, 2016. When that deadline was not met, the council voted on December 7th to extend the negotiation period for an additional 30 days to January 6, 2017, as permitted by the development agreement. We understand that both NDC and the co-op have put in significant time and effort into the negotiations since the council vote on December 7th. Nevertheless, the January 6th deadline passed without a signed letter of intent. Pursuant to the development agreement, the council has two options. Option A is to require NDC to begin seeking another anchor tenant for the project and provide reasonable accommodation to the co-op for the continued operation of its business in its existing location. And option B is to terminate the agreement and pay NDC an amount up to $75,000 for reasonable out-of-pocket costs that the firm has incurred. The council packet that you have has two draft resolutions for consideration, one for option A and one for option B. And given the significance of this project, I recommend that the council approve option A, but we will be hearing a presentation from NDC this evening about where they stand on this. I want to mention just that negotiations are kind of a strange beast, and sometimes it's not till the 11th hour that people really determine what's critical and what can be compromised on. We're not, perhaps we're at the 11th hour now, and we'll see. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Adrienne Washington of NDC for your presentation. And welcome this evening.
Thank you. That's quite awesome how it just sort of comes up when I come out. Give my kudos to your team. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, city staff. I'll also add my Happy New Year wishes to everyone. I was really moved by Councilmember Schultz, among others, for the wishes for the new year, and I share those feelings, and I am very happy to be here. What I'd like to do tonight is take you, and I don't anticipate taking as long as my presentation last time, but what I'd like to do is briefly review the negotiations that we've had with the co-op, talk about what's happened since the December 7th council meeting, talk about where we are now and where are we going. So let me start, and there's been a lot of talk about kind of our preferred plan and what it was and why we came up with it. So I wanted to, not take too much time, but sort of step back a little bit, talk about how we got to where we are before I sort of talk about where we're going. And so the idea behind the preferred plan was a very simple one. It was to create a brand new custom-built home for the co-op, and I'll tell you why we came to this idea, why we think it's great, and I'll leave it at that. And I won't take as much time going through the site plans. I think I spent time last time doing that. This document will be available for public comment. So I really show some of the detail here more perhaps for your questions later on, and also for it being in the public later on. But this would be what the ground floor plan would look like. The site labeled 8K, 8,000 square feet, would have been, the new co-op would have been built. They would have had some space on the second floor as well, and that would leave the rest of the site for other retailers. The second floor of that preferred plan would have included the blue square there, approximately where the Ability Project would go in that site plan. It would leave then other space for potential event space, a terrace on the second floor, perhaps upper level retail where the Turner building was before, and allow some other office space as well. And one of the great things, we'll talk about sort of the objectives of the plan that the city has expressed and that the Junction Task Force expressed was for public parking, and this plan would have maximized the public parking on this site. There were some people, for whatever reason, said Turner building should stay, we shouldn't do it, and so we offered an alternative to that preferred plan, what we call the alternative preferred plan. And that again would provide a brand new turnkey space for the co-op, would provide some additional retail on the site, would repurpose the Turner building so it would be maintained to be used for a different purpose. And we thought this plan is not as good as our preferred plan, but as you can see there from the quotes, sort of almost as good, and we proposed that as well. This again talks about what would happen on the upper floor plan. There would still be space for the Ability Project, there'd be less space for other users, but it was something that we thought was good and have a number of advantages. And one of the disadvantages, of course, we'll talk about this, was that it would have less parking because the parking would only be built underground on the Tacoma Junction site and not on the site of the Turner property. There were a number of advantages of the preferred plans. First, for the co-op. Provide a brand new contiguous store for the co-op, custom built to their specifications of a modern grocery store. Would provide operational layout efficiencies, which would allow them to save cost, and I've heard quite a bit that they want to provide a service to the community. This will lower their costs and allow them to provide lower cost goods to the community. Provide energy savings. This brand new building would be a LEED Gold building, and so it would be both good for the environment and good for the bottom line of the co-op. It would provide an urban farm opportunity with the amount of the new structure, the structural integrity, the space there, provide, if they wanted to have an opportunity for urban farming, to support local producers, to provide educational opportunities for some young people in the community. We thought it'd be a neat feature. This plan would have allowed that. And provide an enhanced customer experience with high ceilings, with modern amenity, with lots of light and air. We thought it'd be something that their customers would enjoy. It would be, very importantly, it would allow for continuity of operations. The idea would be that this part of the development would be built, leaving the existing co-op intact. This brand new facility would be built and they could almost literally close the doors, turn off the lights one night in the old shop, and open up the new one. And so that was something that the co-op expressed a strong desire for, and this would be a great way to do that. Provide loading operation similar or better than their current operation. And for the community, the advantages would be, as good or even better. Provide 70% more retail square footage on the ground floor plane. And I know, us developers, we get very caught up in these types of things. And retail square footage, what does that mean? I mean, for the community, it means, more places to shop, more places to, get that cup of coffee, more places to, interact with your neighbors. Provides more jobs. The co-op rightly is very proudly of their role in providing employment opportunities. The more retail square footage here, the more employment opportunities there would be for other people to work there, and provide tax revenue for the city. And that, the city needs tax revenue to do the Great Scholarship Program, to do the other types of things. And so this plan would be, that retail space, provide all those types of things. Provide almost twice as much parking as any of the other plans that we talked about. Parking, again, being beneficial both to the co-op, for the retail tenants here, for the other parts, merchants in the area. One of the stated goals of the Tacoma Junction Task Force, and this plan would do that. And it provides significantly better street frontage, the pedestrian experience, just a nice sense of development. And I think that, the plan that we produced that, shows that very prominently features the co-op, I think was very well received, and we were excited about it. And so I wanted to really stop here because I think that there were, I've heard, I guess, a couple of comments today from community members that, we are constantly shifting our proposal. Number one, that we were, trying to, buy out the Turner Building, from underneath the co-op and do those things. None of that was our objective. Our objective was to do something great, that we thought would benefit the co-op, that would benefit the community, that would do all these types of things. We weren't asking them to break their lease. This would be something that would be done completely cooperatively with them, with the Matthews family. If they didn't want to do it, that was fine. It was an offer. It wasn't like a take this or leave it. We thought it was a great thing. If they didn't want to even exit their lease, they could have subleased. We would have been interested in perhaps them doing the repurpose themselves. Maybe they would do it, and so it could be within the lease, but it would all be cooperative. So, I want to really sort of emphasize that we presented this plan not as something, as a change, not as something that was like going to be different and, this windfall for us, but we thought it was the best plan for everybody for all these advantages, and that's why we advocated it. But the co-op has very clearly told us no. They do not support this. They do not want to do it, and we hear you. And so we have taken this plan off the table, and we will discuss it no more. So moving forward, so this was that sort of all that occurred right around the time of the last council meeting. So since that council meeting, we left it on the table, and the co-op came to us. They proposed a plan. They first proposed this plan back in September. And then again, as things sort of, died down, and we thought that the negotiations kind of died down, again, right at the end of the year, they came back and they represented this plan. And they did so publicly. It's part of the public record that they submitted. And we discussed this plan in our last meeting. And I'll talk a bit about it, but it was essentially the plan that would allow, and, the term loading dock or loading area, it's a technical term, but the idea would be is that the 18-wheeler trucks would be able to come inside the building and back up to a loading type facility in the co-op. And again, I present some of the more details of the co-op's plan here for the record, but I won't spend much time. And as we talked about last time, as I related to the co-op, and as I related in our last council meeting, we thought that there were just severe disadvantages of the plan they proposed. And again, for the co-op, we felt it did not provide that brand new contiguous, store, would not provide operational layout efficiencies. It wouldn't be, I think maybe perhaps a new space, perhaps we lead go. I don't know whether the Turner building could be, knitted together to create that, but we didn't feel it would provide the energy savings. Wouldn't have the roof structure to provide the urban farm opportunity. It wouldn't have that enhanced customer experience. And so we, and the co-op and I have talked about this. We feel very strongly that the idea of building a building next to the existing Turner building, knitting it together, tearing down the wall, doing all that in my opinion as an experienced developer would not allow for continuity of operations, and in fact would be extremely disruptive. And so we thought it was a bad idea. And something that is a key factor is that because under the co-op's plan, the trucks would have to come through here and essentially park on top of the garage, this entire area would have to be extremely reinforced with concrete and steel, and so this project would be significantly more expensive to build. For the community, the disadvantages, we would have much less retail square footage, so much less of that customer fund, much less of running into your neighbor while you're buying your cup of coffee, fewer jobs, fewer tax revenue, provide much less parking, as I talked about before. It would not be nearly as attractive from the street. It would not have as good a pedestrian experience as our preferred plan, and create more traffic problems. Again, under the plan, as you can see, it's a little hard to see under the words there, but the idea would be the trucks would come in a westbound direction, make a left turn, cross another lane of traffic, come in, and upon exiting, again, the same type of thing, crossing a lane of traffic, making a left turn, and so with the traffic challenges would make them even worse. And so, we told the co-op and we told you publicly that we do not think this plan is in the best interest of the community for your valuable resource, and we would not support it, and so that's that. So that was really very close to the beginning of the new year, and things were not looking good. But we, even then, I thought it was worthwhile to reach out, to have a face-to-face meeting with the co-op. We did so, and during that meeting, we introduced a new concept. And again, to those who've said that we're constantly changing plans, I want to emphasize that we have been attempting to come up with a compromise. We are not, and believe me, it's expensive and time-consuming, and myself and our professionals and my hardworking staff, do not lightly, draw up different plans and put them out just for fun. We're doing it in a sincere attempt to have a compromise with the co-op. So we talked, and it seemed that there was an area that we could agree on, that that the co-op, very strongly wanted to stay in their existing store. They wanted just to expand west, and maybe I was being hard-headed. Maybe I was so enamored with what I thought was a better plan I didn't hear them, but I said, okay, that's what you want, and so we will work to do that. And so we developed this plan, what we're calling the Co-op Expands West plan. The existing store would stay. The new co-op expansion would be to the west. It would be, the buildings would be co-joined, and it would be, less tenant space. We worked and tried to do it. We're still able to do some of the things, and so we presented this plan to the co-op. I think we talked about it in concept and we described it, but we had our architects work on it, and I think we delivered this about 5 or 6 days ago. We actually sort of put, pen to paper, and we delivered this. One of the key features that the co-op has always stressed, and we heard, is that they wanted to specify how far the back of the truck would be here to potential loading area. So we created an internal loading area here, and we drew up the plans, and so that distance was about 45 to 50 feet from the co-op loading area, which was about the same or perhaps a little less than our current space there. And so we presented this to the co-op. It was a compromise on our part, and I applaud and recognize the compromises the co-op has made. And I want to let the council and community know that we have made significant compromises as well. It's not the project that we would have liked to have done, but it's a project that we think will work, and it's a project that we're willing to do. And again, I provide more detail as a public document of what the upper floor plan would look like. One of the spaces there in blue would be the new headquarters of the Ability Project. We would seek other tenants, either office or perhaps, again, an event tenant that would go there. And this, again, is more detail about the parking. Because of this, we'll squeeze out a few more parking spaces, and then under the co-op plan, but again, we lose a lot of parking, but so be it. That's what it takes to get a compromise. We're willing to do that. So, where are we now? That's what everyone wants to know. Say the site plan, as I said, is a significant compromise for what we want to do, but it's acceptable to us. And the co-op, when they responded to us just yesterday, and again, what I heard from Marilyn today in her testimony, that they, essentially accept the site plan. So I think that's, I think that's good. I would, underline most. I think there are some things that, they're still looking for. They want sort of more, bigger trash areas, some other types of things. But I think the basic concept, which is accepting loading by lay-by, which I know is a tremendous compromise, and I recognize that it's on them, and the aspect of moving west is acceptable. And so I think the good news is that most aspects of the site plan are acceptable to most people. So I think that's a big deal, and I do not want to diminish that. However, in their letter and in their LOI, which they gave to us just yesterday, in which I commend my hardworking staff who stayed up late into the night last night going it, they apparently have rejected our proposal on several very fundamental issues. Now, I won't go over them all, but I'll talk about a few. One is who does the work. One of the things that I thought was a good idea in our latest proposal was that, it's become clear that, despite good intentions on both sides, we in the co-op don't always sort of see eye to eye how things done. And also, we were greatly concerned about the continuity of operations, of knitting the two buildings together, not just the physical aspects, but the legal, the zoning, the coordination with the Matthews family, the landlord at Turner Building. And so one of the things that we proposed to kind of, and also there was a big difference, and we thought that this was a months-long effort. The co-op felt that this was something that they could be done with careful coordination. They would not have to close. And so what we came up with, which I thought was a great idea, was that we would build essentially the shell of the expansion space. And we would build the walls, and we'd build it to their specifications. We would match the floor heights. We'd match the ceiling heights. We would build that part and then turn it over to them. And, they would be the ones who would, coordinate taking the wall down. They would be the ones who would tie it together. They would be the ones who would negotiate the agreements with the Matthews family to do that. And so to me, that was kind of a great compromise in that, we wouldn't get in their way, and there wouldn't be fights, and that it would be, left to them to do that. And so that's what we proposed. And then my meeting with Marilyn, and Bob and Abdi, I thought that was something that they liked as well. But in their proposal that came back yesterday, they wanted us to do all the work. And, that's a big problem for us. It really is. It gets us in each other's hair, and I don't think that that's a good idea. Who pays for the work? Our proposal was essentially, again, to build the shell, turn it over to them, which could lease them very cheaply because we weren't building all the internal components. But again, the idea is that they would design the work, they would own the work, they would coordinate the work, and they would pay for the work. And in terms of economics, it's the same, because essentially if we did all the work, we have to charge them, and we have to pay, they have to pay much higher rent. Just seemed much simpler for them. They could get exactly what they want. We wouldn't be arguing about what light fixture to get and, what type of toilet to put in. That if they were paying for it, they were coordinating it, then things would go much easier. And again, their proposal came back, it was for us to pay for all the work. And so that was a major problem for us. Another issue that came up was who pays for parking. In their proposal that they provided to us, they suggest, I believe, they wanted 35 underground parking spaces, and they proposed that they would get those for free, that they wouldn't pay for them, their customers wouldn't pay for them, they would just get them free. And I, had a problem with that. They proposed that there would be restrictions on other uses. For example, they wanted no restaurants within 50 feet of co-op. There were some uses that they didn't want any coffee shops within 50 feet of the co-op. And as you can see, when you go back to the site plan, the co-op's kind of like now right sort of, in the middle of the site. And so by prohibiting within 50 feet, that's a severe restriction. And so that was something that was surprising to us as well. There were, many, many other smaller items of disagreement. I mean, we have a list of like maybe 24. I won't, take the time to go through them all. And really, frankly, one of the things is, and something I disagree very much in, is that for the appropriateness of the document, that the length of the document they provided to us, I think it was 29 pages, plus maybe, 10 pages of attachments and a 5-page cover letter. Just the effort to go through all of that, negotiate all those things, it just made it difficult to do that. And so it was, it was a challenge. And so if I were to sum up kind of where we are now, I think that we've made, in the last 30 days, I think we've made a significant sort of breakthrough in agreeing the site plan, but we got some like real sort of fundamental differences. And, I guess people can say, well, you can, work through those, and maybe we can. But, I was surprised at the, some of the things that I consider very non-standard. I was surprised at the length and detail of a letter of intent. I mean, our letter of intent that we proposed to them was essentially 3 pages plus a signature page. And I can give you examples of many other letters of intent that we and other developers have negotiated with tenants. We even sort of, the one we have with the Ability Project is essentially 3.5 pages. At their request, we beefed up our standard letter of intent. We made it much more, but the document that they presented, and it's public so people can make their own judgment, was, to me, sort of not appropriate at all for this stage of the development. And I'm sure it was done in sincerity, but it's a non-binding document. It's really intended to make sure that people are on the same page, and maybe we can get on the same page, but right now, on January 11th, we are far apart on that page. So to sum up, kind of, where are we now, where we're going, as many people talked about, and I think one of the community members talked about, the existing site is the home of the co-op, a great institution, a beloved institution, but it's the Tacoma Junction parking site is a big parking lot. I think that what I've heard from many, many people is that it's been years. I heard one citizen say, it keeps getting longer. I heard one citizen say it's been 10 years, and then I think someone else said 20. I think I heard tonight 35, so I'm starting to get scared. I see that seal of Tacoma Park behind you, 1890, so I assume it wasn't an issue for the first city council, but it's been a long time, and I think there's a lot of desire to do something. There's differences of opinion on what to be done, but I think the vast majority of citizens that we've talked to want something done there. We always go back and what we do to the project principles that were first enunciated in the Tacoma Junction Task Force to support independent businesses, to prioritize local operators. We want to do that. To improve the aesthetic appeal of the commercial district, provide additional quality redevelopment in the area. I think I agree with a couple people who said that a quality development will spur the redevelopment of other areas as well, and this will be a development that will, I believe, strongly will do that. Provide amenities to adjoining residential neighborhoods. We believe very much in walkable development. We see this as a primarily pedestrian-driven, walkable project. It is not a huge project. I think I heard a couple of community members talk about this being a huge project. This is not a big project. It is a 2-story project. It's about 30,000 square feet. I believe we have 7 or 8 development projects in our pipeline. This will be the smallest of any of them. It is not a super huge project. It is a project that is appropriate in scope to the community and to the site, It is a small site. It's tough to pack all the things that's on there, but it is not a big project. It is appropriate to your community. We want to expand the community space. As you can see, development, even with the smaller one, will have community outdoor space. We still would love to do something on the rooftop. We hope we can work something out, but it will be a gathering space, particularly if we can, some of the uses that we talked about will be there. Environmental sustainability, I believe the LDA commits us to a LEED Gold development. Pretty much every project that we do nowadays, we're in the district, we're in the, in Maryland, Virginia. These are areas where environmental sustainability is just par for the course, and it's something that's very much in our DNA, and so we're very excited about that. And public parking options, I think a couple of people talked about, this is too much parking. Parking was what was called for in the Tacoma Junction Task Force. It's parking not just for the co-op, it's parking not just for this development, it's parking for the entire neighborhood. And so it's something that was called for specifically, and we're going to provide that. And, importantly, I know it's, money and it's not everyone is, there are community purposes, but putting a property that's a parking lot back in the tax rolls is something that this city council has supported, and we want to deliver on that. So where are we going? We, despite everything, despite all the work, it's been a lot of work, but we still want the co-op to be our ground floor anchor tenant. We have an anchor tenant for the top floor now, the Ability Project. We still want the co-op to be the ground floor anchor tenant. We remain willing to negotiate in good faith to achieve this. It just makes sense to us. I mean, it's a beloved community institution. It's a successful $10 million business. It's been in operation for 30 years. It's got 9,000 members. I mean, why would we not want that? And I think we've come a long way, and I still think there's ability to do that. We've worked very hard. I acknowledge the hard work and the expense the co-op has put into this. And I want to recognize the hard work of myself, my team, the money we've spent. And so we've worked, we've tried to do that. We've made progress, but there's still a large gap between the parties. We're ready to move forward. I think a lot of people are excited. I know the city council and the members I've talked to are excited about developing the project, and so we want to move forward in accordance with the project principles that I laid out. And so tonight, the votes, there's two choices essentially. The council votes to move forward, or it votes to cancel the LDA. The way the LDA is structured, those are the only two choices. We want to move forward, and we hope that you will allow us to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So now we'll, if anyone has any questions or wants to make any comments, we'll have a discussion, and then we'll move on to the voting session. So, Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for your presentation, and also to Co-op for your presentation earlier during the public comments. I'm pleased to see that during the last 30 days, just as in the time before, there's been progress and kind of compromise on both sides. I take that as a positive thing. One of the concerns that I heard expressed a couple of times tonight is that the co-op isn't appreciated or has been viewed as being obstructionist. And I think it's, from my perspective, it's been a hard project for me as a council member, because a lot of times I feel like I get sucked into this idea of, well, what's good business for the developer, or what's good business for the co-op? And I keep having to step back and say, well, I may think that the loading dock is a good idea and it ought to be in the middle of the property, and then I have to defer to NDC for they're doing the negotiation and what works for them. And at the same time, I have the same issue with the loading dock, looking at it and saying, well, what's wrong with the truck out front and using a forklift to move the stuff in? Again, I don't run the co-op, and nor could I, and so I can't judge that. So it's up to you guys to negotiate those kind of things and what works for both of you. But I appreciate the work that you've put into it, and I think that I can only assume that both parties have been doing their best to reach agreement at the same time that they are doing their best to serve their own corporate interests as they should. I just had one question from your presentation, and this gets back to what you called, I think, the preferred design that you struck out at this point, but it looks nice. It looks like it's a great opportunity for the community and a great opportunity for the co-op. But that the pushback that I heard from the co-op is that you don't own the building. How can you make plans for what is going to happen with the Turner building, or how can we even be talking about developing a design for something that you may never own that building? And so I just wondered if I heard Marilyn say this evening that, or maybe it wasn't Marilyn, somebody said, that you tried to buy the building out from underneath them. So I assume you've talked to the Turners, but I just wonder why the discussion hasn't gone further, or why you don't know at this point whether that's a reasonable option that you could purchase that building. It seems like it provides the co-op with a brand new, beautiful building to move into. That's whether I can hear Historic Tacoma saying, well, that building's old and historical, we got to keep that, but that may be something that could still happen. But as far as the number one priority of having a co-op here that is expanded and thriving and beautiful, I just wondered if, why the holdup and why you haven't, gone on and seen if we couldn't, if you couldn't acquire either the property or the rights in a way that would not harm the co-op through the lease agreement that they have now, and would not harm the Turners because they've been property owners here in the city for a long time, and we wouldn't want to diminish them in any way. So I'm just curious on why that hasn't happened.
Yeah. The reason it hasn't happened is really my choice. The co-op has been vehement that they do not want to move, and that for us, and so it has been my choice. We could reach out, and they've also represented that the Matthews family does not want to sell, and they do not want to do anything to disturb their building. And so I guess it's a couple of things. One, I believe them. If they, they've told me that, don't bother. They don't want to sell. They said they have a letter saying they don't want to sell. And also they've made it quite clear they don't want that. And, I take them at their word. They don't want that. And so I think it's, life's too short. I'm not going to go to if they're telling me they don't want to move, they don't want us to own that building. Like I said, it's not that big a project. It's not like we're making, $1 billion or $1 million, even at this point, $10 would be nice. To me to go and upset this whole apple cart and this whole community and get accused of buying them out and pushing them out. I just, my hope was always that they would see this and they would say, hey, this is a great idea. Let's explore it. Let's go to the Matthews together, maybe with the city, and maybe say it's a great thing for everybody. Let's do it together. But they have consistently said, no, don't go there. No, don't go there. And so I've chosen not to go there.
Okay.
It may not be a good sound reason, but emotionally that's been my reason.
All right. I thank you. That's all for now.
Councilmember Mann?
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment on the design that you had proposed if you were to have acquired that site. The one concern I actually had about it was that it creates a significant massing problem for the residential properties right nearby on the corner of Sycamore and Columbia and across the street on Sycamore. So I guess in some ways that was a concern with that version of the proposal. I wanted to ask you, because I think this hasn't come to us, you haven't had to draw this yet, I think, is what does it look like if you're making reasonable accommodation for the co-op, but co-op is not part of the project? The property line is somewhere out from the building itself of the existing Turner building, and so I'm just curious how much that changes the design square footage, for example, of your space, and what kind of zoning requirements, for example, there would be in terms of governing the proximity of two buildings and any other sort of zoning requirements that might exist.
Okay. So, I mean, it looks very similar to this, except that instead of this rust-colored 6,000 square foot space being the co-op, it's somebody else. And instead of this little cutout being here, it's like sort of a cutout right there. So it essentially looks like that.
Do you not lose 500 square feet because there would need to be an alley between two buildings or something like that?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
I don't have any actual questions for you. I think you've been plain spoken about what you've tried to do and where things stand right now. So I just want to address a few remarks in general to the community. I guess it was raised in the comments earlier today by someone who said, I just don't understand how all this got started. And I think the answer to that is that it was, well, I guess you could go back to what Mayor Bruce Williams said back in the 1980s, but in the more recent version of this, I guess we can think in terms of epochs. The current epoch is that it was the Tacoma Junction Task Force that was organized at the behest of the community and the willfulness of the then City Council in 2009. And the report, I think, was presented, if I'm remembering correctly, in 2010. Is that about right?
2012.
Was it 2012?
I think it was a little late.
I'm thinking of another task force.
Okay.
But the Tacoma Junction Task Force then made it very clear a whole set of recommendations, and in the early going of deciding what steps we wanted to take in terms of crafting the RFP, the residents were constantly on our case, meaning the city council members' case, to remember the Tacoma Junction Task Force recommendations, and please do not lose sight of those, even though some of the recommendations were mutually exclusive with others. But that was okay, because that's what we wanted to get from the task force. And so we made the effort to issue an RFP that would address the salient things that were in the task force, one of which, of course, was to provide for the expansion of the co-op, but a whole lot of other aspects as well. That's how it got started. It wasn't like some other way, which we don't need to talk about. And I think we've lost track here. We've gotten so far now that the whole thing has come down to be a debate about the future of the co-op. My concern as a city council member representing Ward 6 and also trying to do the best I can for the whole city is that Tacoma Junction is probably the second most important intersection in the city that we have, after perhaps the intersection of Laurel and Carroll, at least in terms of our sense of identity and image. And yet it has suffered mightily because of the lack of focus and development there. The co-op has done as well as it has, notwithstanding the fact that there's a lot of it's a difficult area with problems with traffic, problems with pedestrians, and a lot of empty space in the form of a parking lot. And so what we're trying to do here is to help rebuild this intersection so that it becomes an important placemaking that people will benefit, not only the folks within walking distance, but the people from all over our city, including my ward. So that's my interest, and frankly, the residents in my ward, in Ward 6, I've talked about it a lot in my communications to my constituents, and just about everybody is just saying, let's just get this project built. I don't know anybody, I've never met anybody in any of these meetings that we've had here, these public conversations, where anybody has said they are opposed to the co-op. I mean, it's right up there with apple pie and motherhood. And so, but yet somehow or another, what we've heard is this dichotomy of, it's the developer versus the co-op. I don't understand what the basis for that is. What we heard tonight is a serious effort by NDC to address all the needs of the co-op. And I want to tell you that I think, I'm impressed that you're still standing here, because I think a lot of developers, and I'm dead serious about this, would have thrown in the towel by this time, because it has been a long process, and developers don't like long processes because they can't make money standing around talking to community people. They want to get things started. But you've hung in there and kept coming up with alternatives after another in response to the changing concerns of the co-op, and we still are hearing them. We're hearing just this last day of the co-op's concerns about the cost of building out the space, which is a new concern we didn't know about until today. It's been a long time, but we finally learned about it. The development agreement is something that is a legal document. It's a contract between the city, and it stipulates what we have to do at tonight, and that's already been explained here. So we don't really have any choice. We have to follow the legalities of that development agreement, which I'm prepared to do. I think that I'm going to support our going ahead and asking you to continue to work for the city as our developer to seek another anchor tenant, because that's what we need to do. But with the realization and the encouragement that you can continue to talk and negotiate with a co-op in good faith, maybe something will work out. I mean, the progress you've made in the last 35 days is far beyond what I imagined when we talked on December 7th, and I voted against the 30-day extension. So I'm very impressed by the co-op's willingness to make compromises. I'm impressed by the fact that you are coming up, pulling rabbits out of the hat here at the last minute. I'm hopeful that something can be done, but if we don't continue, then we will have pretty much blown away 3 years of effort here, and I'm not going to be a party to that. So I'm going to support this Resolution A of the two that have been proposed.
Thank you. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Washington, for the presentation. Just had a few questions. So it does seem like some progress has been made in the sense that both sides have indicated their willingness to compromise in certain ways. Your statements were to the effect that although that's happened, the compromises haven't gone all the way yet. So one of the questions that comes up then inevitably is, if the council were to vote to authorize, I guess it's item A, which is the one that allows you to seek another anchor tenant, would you just do that, or would you still want to talk to the co-op if the co-op wanted to talk to you? How do you sort of see that?
I mean, hopefully I've been clear that we would still like to talk to the co-op. We don't have another tenant like kind of sitting in the wings that we're going to, bring them out, tomorrow. We don't. We haven't talked to anyone else. The co-op is the logical anchor tenant, and we still want to have them.
So you don't have like a particular even type of store or business that you would, at this stage, think would, hey, that would be a great type of store to have there?
I mean, we have ideas, but we have not thought of anyone in particular, and we have not talked to anyone at all.
And the size, I guess, would be, under that scenario, the biggest business would only have about the same square footage as the current co-op building does, right?
Well, I mean, to be clear, I mean, we demised the space here in this plan and sort of as a, I don't say a theoretical exercise, but as a planning exercise. I mean, potentially someone would come in and want to take the entire space.
I see. Okay. So that's not an absolute structure the way you have it there. So what would happen if the council voted for A, to seek another anchor tenant, and could you just say, well, we'll just have 4 or 5 small businesses there, none bigger than the co-op, and the co-op will remain in operation. They have an 18-year lease. Would they still sort of be an anchor tenant in a way,
Well,
even though they wouldn't be your tenant?
They wouldn't be our tenant.
But
correct.
they would draw people there, and there would be a
Yes.
synergy of that, right?
Correct.
I mean, is that actually a viable scenario, or is that just?
I mean,
me
again,
being silly?
obviously I can't speak for the co-op. I mean,
Right.
they have expressed that they very much want to expand. So I don't know if want means need. I mean, they've been very successful. They're profitable, long-term business in their existing space, and so I would think that they could continue in that vein.
Right. What about the walking versus driving? Because I've heard Councilmember Schultz mention people from over in his section like the idea they would probably have to drive or at least bike over. It's a little bit far to walk. A lot of other people have talked about the walkability of the co-op. It sounds like under this plan maybe we'd end up with about the same number of parking spaces. So what would be your sense of, would it still mostly be folks would go there who could walk? Obviously, there's parking, as there is now. Would it be about the same as that, or would it, what's your sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to predict. A lot depends on the tenants that we would locate. I'll say a couple things. One of the development projects we did, I'll say a couple things. One is that our company's been around. We've been around 18 years, so about 2 decades. I think every passage of time, the projects that we've done have required less and less parking. And we found that more and more people are walking, biking, taking public transportation, and so we've seen, over kind of our corporate career, less and less demand for parking. I'd say number one. I'd say number two, one of the projects that we did develop had a 10,000 square foot grocery store, a Yes Organic Market, and they were very concerned about parking, and I believe they have about 17 spaces for a 10,000 square foot store, which is essentially the same size as the co-op would be if it expanded. And I shopped it quite a bit, and I'm always able to get a parking space. And
Is
so
that down in D.C.?
That is in D.C. And so I think that we've just been continuing to be surprised at how little parking is needed. And so one of the main reasons we wanted to put parking here is not necessarily for our own tenants, but again to meet the request of the task force and of the council of having parking that would serve, larger community than just our development and co-op development.
One last question. There's been talk about the row of stores across the street where the bakery is in historic Tacoma and so on, and there are a few empty storefronts there. What's been your experience if you have a development like this? Does it depend on the kinds of businesses in the development as to whether it would stimulate other activity kind of across the street? What's the relationship
I believe
there?
it would. I mean, for this type of infill development, again, this is not a large project at all. I think it really stimulates the ability for complementary types of businesses to exist. So, there's enough to kind of to go around. There's like a potential restaurant that could be spurred, and so it's not like you've got a Walmart that plops down in the middle of the town and sucks the life out of the main street. It's really the reverse of that. I think it'll be additive to what's going on in the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mel?
Yeah, just briefly, because it came up in earlier comments. I wanted to thank you for doing what you did in terms of coming up with different proposals, to thank you for trying to talk to the owners of the building, the owners of Johnny's Auto Clinic and the Healy Auto Surgeons building. At the beginning of this process, that's exactly what I had hoped any developer would do, which is start with a basic concept, but then try to figure out what the options were around this. And knowing the early challenges both parties indicated that they had in talking through this, and the importance for the co-op had identified, and I think we identified in our resident committee on business continuity. I think that I saw the proposal that you put together and that we described last time we met to provide that continuity as exactly what you said it was. So I just wanted to be clear and say thank you for that.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. First thing, I want to thank you for sticking around.
You guys are getting me worried. Like you keep.
I know this has been a difficult project. I mean, especially because it's so small. The profit margins are not huge. So I want to start out thanking you guys. And I want to thank the co-op for continuing to push forward and negotiate and look for ways to come to some agreement. I mean, these projects are difficult, you know. Both parties get frustrated, but you know, if you want to, you can come to a deal. A couple of questions for you. The Ability Project, has a draft lease gone out on that LOI?
No, we have been, a couple of things. One, we wanted to understand, you know, and maybe it's been my sort of tunnel vision. I really believed we could reach an agreement with the co-op, which drives the site plan, which helps us sort of figure out the entire project. So I've been, you know, very focused on that. So we have not put out a draft lease to the Ability Project.
Okay. Do you have in your mind a hard deadline once the council says, and I hope we say, go forward, when you're going to say, you know what, I have to come up with another option? Is that 3 months, 6 months?
I mean, I think that's a tough question. It's a great question. It's a tough question. I mean, I think that we have to, you know, really like very soon believe that we may not be able to reach a deal with the co-op, and start thinking about those other things, like you said, like the lease with the Ability Project, like looking at what other types of tenants, and start kind of preparing for that possibility. But until we actually have the other tenant in hand, we can still kind of, you know, hope and work with the co-op. So I would say there's no hard deadline, but I think it is very soon to start thinking, okay, if this doesn't happen, start opening our mind and our, you know, relationships and our outreach to other people, and begin to look at the world sort of differently than just that focus.
Right.
Is that a fair answer?
Yes, that's fair. In my final question, at least for this round, we discussed this, you know, maybe a year ago, year and a half. I don't know if you guys put any energy into it, but whether a second story made sense on the co-op's existing property.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys go back to that, investigate it?
You mean with the existing structure in
right,
place?
The Matthews building.
No, we've been told that, well, for one thing, we haven't looked at it, but we did ask for architectural plans of the existing store, and we're told there isn't none. So we really, it would be something we would like to look at. And I think also, it comes back to Councilmember Mills' point, I think with the couple things. One, with the setback, you look at the site plan there, and with if the parking were to remain, if this were to go up another story, I think it would not, you know, and there, you know, I'm sure there's probably a resident who lives right here, so I'm going to get in trouble, so I'm going to stop. But I think that with the setback, it would not be, you know, an impingement too much on the site plan. And also, it's funny, someone talked about the task force recommendations, and one of the things that the task force had recommended was giving priority to expanding the Turner building onto the parking lot to the east. And so that's something actually the task force talked about, of actually moving this there. So it wasn't sort of an idea that we just came up with. It was actually an idea that we found in the task force report.
And you've done a number of deals, and you know, some properties have existing tenants in them, and you have to figure out, you know, maybe they want to stay, or maybe you buy them out, or you know, there has to be a way that you move forward. Have you ever come across a situation where a tenant would not leave their lease or would not consider another option in a lease?
Yes, we have. I mean, you know, and that's one of the things I think I've learned in my development career is that, you know, that these are people and these are not just buildings. And a lot of times I've been different properties and I'm like, you know, why doesn't, you know, this guy want to sell? You know, first he says, you know, give me twice as much as it's worth. And I say, okay. And he says, find me, you know, another place to move my business, and we go out and we do that. And then he says, yeah, well, you know, it's that there is emotional attachment to people's businesses, much like you have emotional attachment to your home. And so, you know, I don't know where you live, but I might come to you and offer you all the money in the world for your home, and you're like, you know, you don't want to take it. And so I've learned it over the years, and so it happens. It happens a lot more than sort of I would think it would, but it's a fact of life, and I respect it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Thank you to the co-op, and also, actually, before the co-op or NDC, the community members for coming out tonight, because I know you all feel very passionately about this, and I think I can say unanimously up at this dais, we all value this project, are looking at it with a lot of thought, you know, look at it in a thoughtful way, and I know that there's a lot of competing, passionate views on both sides. Thank you to the co-op and also NDC. Mr. Washington, your presentation reminded me of one thing. In terms of option A versus option A or B, we're here because we've expired the 120 days, and then after the extension, we've expired the 30 days. But in fact, if you think about it, we entered into the effective date of the development agreement was August 1st. Theoretically, I went to law school because I don't do math. You should have probably had an LOI by December 29th, not January 11th. But because this council meets every Wednesday and took a break, you got what looks like 11 or 13 additional days to do this. I'm glad that you've made the progress you have, and my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, whether, you know, if the council votes for option B, then it'll be nice to meet you, have a good day. If the council votes for option A, although the language in the agreement says that require the developer to commence seeking a letter of intent with an anchor tenant for the project other than the co-op, in the interest of your business, there's nothing in there if you make a business judgment that precludes you from continuing those negotiations, and I appreciate you conveying to us today that you intend on doing so, and I would urge the co-op, based upon your supporters who are here today, of which many are up here at the dais, that you do the same. But that also raises another point, is that if the council votes for option A, then you have another clock that will start ticking, which is, I believe you have 18 months to find that other anchor tenant and enter into a lease. Just like I believe that contracts should be followed and parties should perform under those contracts, and then we are at this unfortunate stage. Hopefully we still reach an agreement at some point. I hope you understand that we'll hold you to that 18 months, and that we can terminate the agreement at that stage as well if no lease is reached. So I hope that you continue to engage in negotiations with the co-op. I can't force you to do that, but don't do it at the expense of the 18 months you have. Just like we're not going to be, we don't have the ability to grant an additional 30 days today to your negotiations with the co-op, we will not have the ability under the contract to give you an additional extension for, the new anchor tenant. So thank you, but I just wanted to convey that because this contract is a contract for a reason, and I think the party should perform consistent with that. Thanks.
Thank you. So a number of my colleagues have thanked you for being here, and I thank you as well. My question to you is, why are you here? You've talked about this project being the smallest one your firm has right now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, ideally, a deal would have been made a while ago. We have this, as Councilmember Qureshi says, we have other things in our development plan that down the road, it still may not happen. So why are you here?
I like hearing about stop signs on and spending hours. Actually, I kind of do. It's kind of cool. But seriously, we talked this about a lot. In our company about why we do what we do, and obviously we are a for-profit business and we have salaries to pay and families to feed, and so we do have to make money, but. We're creators, and, I talk about this a lot, that what kind of drives us and what we like is to take the elements of, land and, brick and mortar and tenants and communities and architects and creativity, and from all those things that are pieces, create something that excites us, that drives our passion, that rewards people, that we can be proud of. And this is a project like that. It's a tough project. It is, it is not a big project, but it's very creative, and it's a great community. I mean, I'm here sitting for 3 hours, but you guys are sitting up there for 3 hours, and I admire that. And I have, worked with and presented in front of many, bodies like yourselves, and I like you guys and I admire you guys, and I like working with you, and I like this community, and I even like the people who take 3 hours to sit in this and come up and say, no one's really said any bad things about us, but it's a couple things, but I admire that caring, and so we think that we can create something cool here. We think we can create something that's different. I mean, you can always look at things two ways. I mean, to hear that no one's been able to do this in 10 years, no one's been able to do this in 20 years, no one's been able to do it in 35 years. I mean, wow, we can do that. It's a pretty cool accomplishment. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, giving a lot of reasons, but, they all sort of play into why we do what we do and why we're here. And, I believe we're going to get this done, and I believe that it's going to be something that you all are going to be excited about, and that will stand the test of time and will be a model for other things. And, also I'm stubborn. And so, I see a problem and I focus on it, and I don't want to give up. So I'll give you about 10 reasons, and it takes all 10 of those to make us hang in there.
Okay, great. For our work session, does anyone else have any questions or comments? And do you want to move to our voting session now?
Voting session.
All right, we will move to the voting session now. So we have two resolutions in front of us. I thought the way we could do this is council members can speak. If you know your preference and feel at this point you want to state that, you can state your preference, and then we could move forward with the vote on the resolution, discussing the specific resolution, either A or B. That looks like it has the most votes at the time. Yeah.
I forgot one other reason, and I really should have thought of it. I mean, we really do want to help the co-op thrive and survive into the next century. We really do.
Thank you.
So that's the only reason.
Great.
So we're just going to go down the line?
We can, or I don't want to make people go first, but if someone would like to jump in and go first.
What are we doing now?
No, it's quite all right. It's 10:30 at night. So for our voting session, I thought how we would organize this conversation is we have two resolutions in front of us. If people want to comment now, and if you feel like you want to state which resolution you would vote for, that's fine. And then after everyone's had a chance to speak, then we would move towards which of the resolutions has the most support, discuss that one, and then take a vote.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I should make you go first. No, okay. Councilmember Schultz is volunteering to go first.
Yeah, I've already made my position clear in my previous remarks of a few minutes ago in favor of Resolution A.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Kovar?
I do have to go. Huh?
No, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I do want to thank everybody for coming in, for the co-op representatives and for the NDC representatives, and for all the folks who came. We had a great series of speeches. I heard from a lot of people electronically. I even got a few phone calls from people, which, other than my in-laws, that no one ever calls me on the phone anymore. So that was so that was good. And I really think, it represents the passion that people feel. There's that old phrase, I've probably said this before, but when something really affects you, you say it hits you where you live, and that's what we're talking about here. So it's totally appropriate that people should feel very strongly about it. At the same time, I kind of feel like none of the different options that have been discussed and none of what's going to happen is going to be all good or all bad. It's going to be some sort of compromise. And I think, one of the things that's really driving that, and this was alluded to by several people, and I think Mr. Washington just mentioned it as well, the particular parcel of land is really just not that big. And so to get the loading and parking that the co-op understandably needs, and to allow for the finances, I think, of the development to work out, that's a real challenge given the size of it. And it's easy to say, wouldn't it be great if we could involve these other parcels of land? But that just isn't what happens. So that's where we are. So I encourage people to think of it not as, hey, what if this happens a certain way, I'm going to get everything I want, or I'm not going to get what I want. We're all going to kind of hopefully find the right balance and have it work out if we can. It's going to be difficult. Everything I've heard suggests that under any of the scenarios, even if a totally different anchor tenant is found, that the co-op's going to stay in operation at least as it currently is, and they talked about the 18-year lease and so on. So I don't think this is a question about does the co-op survive. Obviously, from the co-op's point of view, having a good loading arrangement and parking is crucial, and we have that written into the development agreement, and I think the next spot before the 18 months that Councilmember Qureshi was talking about, where we get to weigh in, is on the site plan. And so I think I would only support a site plan that I felt properly, reasonably accommodated the co-op's needs there. So I feel like that is taken care of. I've tried not to take sides and say that one or the other negotiators is doing something wrong or right. As I've said before, I viewed this from the perspective of what's best for the city overall. I was one of the people, and we all supported, I think, to push for a few changes to the development agreement that I think gave the city more leverage. Maybe they gave some of the other negotiating partners more leverage. I'm not really sure. But I was glad to support that. I was glad to support the extra 30 days. I think it was the city manager said we're in the 11th hour. The 11th hour should really be the 12th hour, because the 11th hour is between 10 and 11. But we're kind of in the 13th hour now. But it sounds like, from what Mr. Washington said, they still want to talk. Maybe the co-op does too. We can't force them. It seems like there's the potential for some sort of compromise there. And I encourage, if the discussions do go forward, I don't think we need to hear, well, here were the other proposals that earlier NDC proposed. Well, they didn't work out, so let's just stick with the one that's kind of on the table. And I would say the same thing in terms of the co-op. They really liked the earlier proposal around the time of the RFP. That's not really on the table anymore. So if there's going to be discussions, let's concentrate on what's actually on the table, and understanding that there were earlier versions that people liked a lot that probably can't happen. I think that it seems clear to me that discussions could continue. I hope they do. I encourage them to them to do that. There's been a lot of talk about how the co-op is a unique and crucial institution within the city, and I agree with that. I guess I would say I don't think it isn't I don't think things can be more unique than other things, but I don't think it's the most unique thing. We've talked about a lot of these in the past year that I've been here. The library is a really crucial resource here. The farmers market, both farmers markets, the one in Ward 1 and the one in Councilmember Schultz's ward. There's a lot of great institutions and resources here in the city that make Tacoma Park what it is. I think the co-op is clearly one of the crucial ones. I'd love us to help them expand. I think they'll remain in operation regardless. I'd like to see us go forward in this, not in a divided way where we're pitted against each other. I think the 30 days helped, and maybe a little more time will help. So for me, I'm prepared to vote to extend to vote for A, which says that the NDC would be empowered to seek another anchor tenant. But again, I hope that the discussions can continue toward the compromise. It seems kind of like it's maybe out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to keep my remarks short. I've been working on this for at least 18 months. I am going to support option A. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I've often said that if this job was just about speed bumps and stop signs, I wouldn't want it. But they're looking awful good right tonight. I have to say that since I joined this council in 1999, I think this is the most difficult decision and difficult vote that I've faced. I'm encouraged tonight to see the progress that's been made on both sides towards an agreement. I'm also encouraged to hear that the co-op's going to stay in town, probably regardless of what happens by this vote or tonight. But nonetheless, I think the co-op is an important piece of the character of this city. And for that reason, I'm encouraging my colleagues to vote for B to terminate the development agreement.
Councilmember Mail?
Thank you. Ward 2 residents are divided on this issue, and I'll get back to that in more detail in a minute. But I wanted to say one of the things about being on council in this is my 6th year now, is that it's something that in some parts of it are lonely and are isolating. And it's the tough votes. It's the tough votes where people are 50-50 one way versus another, 50-50 in the ward, 50-50 in the city. And you see the people on the street that care about whatever issue it is passionately that you disappointed. And it gets hard. So I think so I did a poll of sorts. I emailed 400-ish Ward 2 residents last night at midnight and got responses from about 50 of them. And if I vote for option B, people like Shannon and Cindy and Wendy, people who emailed me with strong views about the decision, are going to be disappointed. And if I go with the other option for NDC to move forward, people like Abdi and Marilyn and people who work in the store like Susan and Les and the board members, Robert on my block, end up disappointed. And that's a hard part of this decision. It's a hard part of sidewalk votes where there's 30% of people who don't want the sidewalk on their side of the street or whatever it is, or to change the voting age or whatever the issue is. That's a really tough part of being on council in a small place like Tacoma Park where people know your name and people see you on the street. It's a great thing about it, too, because it means you're connected to decisions and you're connected to why it matters and why it's important to take decisions seriously. Some of the facts on this issue are really important, and I want to emphasize something that Marilyn, I think, brought up in her opening remarks. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe it was Abdi, actually, which is that the co-op's prices are affordable on many things, and where the prices are high, they're high because the product is a high-quality product. If you want to get cheap antibiotic injected chicken meat that's full of water, I can buy that at Shoppers, but that's not what I get from the co-op. That's not what I get from Whole Foods, and you pay comparable prices. And I appreciate what the co-op has done on prices and the ways that I can shop at the co-op for some things and not others at different times of the year. And I appreciate how much the products that you guys sell matter to people in the community, people in the neighborhood of this community, and people around the region. So I just wanted to really clarify that and have just great praise for how wonderful it is to go in the store, which is a block from my house, and knowing you all both through this process and just as a customer and resident. The issue of whether something like this is divisive, I don't know that this issue is divisive so much as it makes transparent that we're divided, that we have different views about what should happen at the junction, on council in the city, among residents in the area. And I actually think it's a good thing to bring out where there's different views about some issue like this development possibility. I don't believe the process itself has been run in a way that's divisive, that made people who already disagreed or who already had different visions and different priorities. I don't think it's made us more divided. I think it's brought some of that to light and created an opportunity for moving forward. I want to thank everybody who's been part of this process, certainly the co-op staff and board, and all the members of the co-op, all the members of the public who stuck through this, who came to meetings, who are here at 1040 on yet another night in a long process that, by Mayor Williams' accounting, stretches back, 2 or 3 decades. I really appreciate what NDC has done. Adrian, your work, the work of your staff, the designs. I took some flack for the email I sent last night at midnight because I used the word exciting. I think the concepts that I have seen are things that excite me. So I used a word that reflects some of my views about some of those designs, while at the same time, as I indicated on the one issue, there are concerns with some of those issues, some of those designs. I really appreciate where the co-op has gotten on the issue of the lay-by and the loading issue, and we've clearly made progress on what to me seemed to be the most significant outstanding issue. Adrian, Mr. Washington, you summarized some of the new issues that we have not spent a lot of time talking about at any point in this process that have arisen in the versions of the LOI between the co-op and NDC that have come up. And I don't think we all know much about those issues because we haven't had a briefing on the details of the 2 LOIs or heard more than a appropriately quick summary from you, or heard much from the co-op about these other issues that are still dividing you both. It feels like the distance apart is very small. So whereas we used to talk about, maybe the last meeting even, we talked about residents were concerned about the unacceptability of the loading arrangement and some other issues. A lot of those design issues seem to have been resolved, which is exciting. But we're at a point in the process, as my colleagues and the mayor have indicated, that where we've made a commitment in a contract to reach a decision, and we've given ourselves some choices. I very much expected, I very much hoped when this process started that we would end up with a successful resolution. We would have finished this 6 months ago, 8 months ago, with co-op happy and satisfied moving forward in partnership with NDC. If that didn't work out, my expectation was that I would vote against moving forward with the developer. When I wrote my update last night to residents, I expected to vote against moving forward with NDC in terms of seeking a new anchor tenant. And it's because, to the point I was making at the beginning, the co-op is a neighbor. The members of the co-op are neighbors. Staff of the co-op, the board of the co-op are neighbors and family. And while some of the things about the process have been flawed, you sort of take your neighbors and your friends and your family for their flaws, and you stick by them. And that, at some level, is where I was, last night. This morning, the feedback I got, I think I got 50. I just got another one in the last hour. 51 Ward 2 residents weighed in. And they had, I think almost all of them had very clear views. The wording of what I wrote didn't affect what they felt. 28 of those said move forward with NDC. 23 of those said, you know, if it costs us $75,000, then take that option and try to figure out how to make this work in the long term. Despite that, I still today expected to be voting against this agreement for the reasons I've mentioned, to break it and to move on, and to try to still make a development happen in the near future, but in a different way, with a lay-by, with somebody else doing it, or perhaps with NDC, but in a round two, I don't know. Taking advantage of the fact that we could acquire the designs, that's what we would get, in part through the $75,000 that we would pay. Despite my wife's email this afternoon in favor of moving forward with NDC, I still thought, you know, maybe I would vote against it. But testimony tonight really made a difference for me, listening to people talk about it, listening to where everyone in the community has come out and how much progress we've made, and thinking about the alternatives, thinking about how much work we put into it. Just, you know, left me with the choice, with the uncomfortable choice, the difficult choice, the isolating choice that I described from a personal perspective of thinking that we should authorize NDC to seek a new anchor tenant. I very much appreciate NDC's willingness to keep trying to make this work with the co-op. I very much agree with it. Certainly Councilmember Kovar said this. I know others of my colleagues did as well, that we will, I plan to hold you to the reasonable accommodation in the site plan that's developed, the things that we require, the opportunities that we continue to have, and the authority and power we continue to have, both in terms of council approval of a site plan, but also council's ability to influence the county and the zoning commission when they make a decision, to make sure that that reasonable accommodation is there for a co-op that wants to stay for the full term of their remaining 19 years of their lease. So that's where I've ended up. It's surprised me through the day in thinking about this, that this is where I am, but...
So wait, where are you?
But this is where I am. I am for...
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm for moving forward with NDC, directing them to work, continue to work with the co-op, but also to look for a new anchor tenant.
Option A. Thank you.
Option A.
Thank you. Councilmember Qureshi?
Thanks, Mayor. I've already expressed how much I appreciate the residents who came out. The co-op is in Ward 3. Their Ward 3 is just about as divided as Councilmember Mills' ward. And, you know, there are co-op supporters, there are supporters of moving forward, and many people make statements about, you know, the co-op is one of the most diverse employers in town, something I appreciate. This agreement moving forward would eliminate the co-op. A very highly charged statement that I appreciate because it gives you pause, but frankly, it's misinformation. The choice here is not the co-op or development. I didn't have an opportunity to speak with Ms. Berger before we met tonight, which was my intention, to which I apologize to her. But when we last spoke, the co-op's going to be here. It's whether the co-op's going to be part of this development. And this has been a long process. Today, and Mr. Washington will appreciate this because we talked about this at the last council meeting, and every opportunity I get to remind people how old I am, the 35 years came up. That's my age. So we've been talking about this issue for that long, if not longer. And I appreciate that people who are older also like to walk, and the people who I'm referring that to are sitting right there in the middle. The fall of 2010, I believe, is when this city council, or previous city council, authorized the Tacoma Junction Task Force to move forward with the report. 2012, I believe, in February is when that report was issued. Now, there wasn't consensus in that report even. There was varying opinions. It's a reflection of this great community. The deadline for this LOI between these parties was January 6th of 2017, 5 days ago, 3 years to the day of when this city approved a solicitation for proposals for bidders to come in for developing this lot. This has been a long process. There has been multiple hearings, and there will continue to be multiple hearings. And Councilmember Mail is absolutely right. You know, you would think that, oh, you're a politician, you're an elected official, you must be really popular. It depends on the vote, right? But I don't ever feel like I can't walk by a resident or neighbor's street or their home if they disagree with me on an issue, because I'm very honest with them about where I am. I'm very honest with my position on this issue, which is how much I value the co-op. Abdi, when I saw him today, like when I see him every day, he's my Muslim brother, I say Assalamu alaikum to him because I wish him peace every moment I see him. I do not want him to lose his job. I do not want the co-op out of the junction. I'm very happy that you all have come so far. Abdi talked about how he has 9,000 bosses. We have about 17,000 bosses, many of whom are never in this room, many of whom never email me, many of whom may not even walk through the junction. And you have to take all that into consideration. And I just hope that the people in the community recognize, and I apologize to everybody about one thing, which I think my colleagues can join me on. I can't even tell you how many emails I've received just in the last 6 weeks. And I can tell you with absolute certainty I have not responded to every email, and I can tell you with absolute certainty I will not be able to respond to every email. But I read every email, and I value very much how difficult this decision is for many. But again, this is a long process. The city is now in a position to deal with two options. One is to continue with the developer through another very long process where 18 months from now, if we don't have a lease, we might have to terminate this agreement anyways. But I think we owe it to the city, the constituents who are not in this room, including the ones who are in this room, to see this process through. And I think the materials that we've received from the various parties, and people have asked us to adopt this LOR or that. That's not our job. Our job is to allow these parties who are private entities to work at arm's length with one another and negotiate for themselves what is in their best interest. And I'm hopeful, I remain hopeful, that the outcome will be that we will have a co-op that will be a thriving part of that junction and will be a thriving part of the future of that revitalized junction. And I agree with Councilmember Mail. I think one thing that was really very much swayed me today was the community input. I mean, there's people who came in here tonight. I mean, I know that little girl back there with you, it's way past her bedtime. But your comments and the fact that you read up on what this process entailed. A young man who was standing here from Ward 1, William Ricker, I think was his name, was the most important thing for me, which is don't let the loudest voices always prevail. We have a process, and this process has been open and fair, and I believe it will continue to be. And I urge, I mean, I think I'm the last one, but I think option A is in the best interests of the entire community, and that's what I'm going to be voting for tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
The last one.
I'm the last one.
You are the last one.
So I just want to take a moment and thank everyone for all the work that's been done, and in particular all the work that's been done most recently. This has been a long and a complex process. We've had a lot of meetings, open houses, discussions, emails, and a lot of calls. People call me all the time. Peter, I don't know why they don't call you, but I'll tell them to call you. And I just want to recognize that a number of people who have, I think, really helped this process, and I know maybe the outcome isn't what they would like to see after tonight, but I wanted to thank Fred Feinstein, Nadine Block, Diane Curran, Betsy Taylor, and especially Fred. You know, I think it was 2.5 years ago that we sat in my living room when I had an open house one Saturday afternoon for about 4 hours, and people just came and talked about what they cared about the junction and where this process had to go. And I think about back 2.5 years to that, and then I think about the way I spent this past Friday, which was having some residents who hadn't paid attention to this issue in the past 3 years come to the office hours I held on Friday and sat down and said, "Can you explain this to me?" And it was like, okay, where do we start? Which part? Where do we go? Where do we start this? And I really feel like it in the last, reflecting on this, just thinking about where we have come. And I agree with Councilmember Mayle and what President Obama said last night. Democracy does not require uniformity. It does not require us all to always agree. In fact, I'd get really nervous if we did. You know, I think there's something called the 10th man, or I'll call it the 10th woman. You get 10 people together. Once one person gets the job to be the person to disagree when all other 9 agree. And I think that's important because that means we're challenging each other. But it's also important that we do it respectfully. And I have to say, when I sent out emails today, and there were a lot of emails to send out, I was very honest with people about what I was thinking and how I was processing this. And there were a number of people who emailed me back and said, "Thank you. I don't agree with you, but thank you. Thank you for being thoughtful and for responding and just working on this." And I think that's really the community we live in, and I appreciate the process we've been through. So over the last couple of weeks, especially the last 2 weeks or week and a half, with the different LOIs going back and forth, the concepts being discussed, I was really hopeful. And I have seen a great deal of progress, and I really do want to thank the co-op and NDC for all their work that's gone into this. But as I was looking at the different concepts and the LOIs and the discussions of laybys and other things, and actually Mr. Washington said this tonight, he said, you know, we are taking that off the table, or I've had tunnel vision thinking about just, you know, what the co-op needs. For me, I started to think in the last week and a half, but wait a minute, we promised and we've talked about this community input. And we even have this great committee called the Community Consultation Process Advisory Committee. And they're ready to go and engage the community. And we need to be moving forward. So tonight, as we think about what our decision is, should we move forward or end it? I'm not ready to end it because I'm really ready to begin it, because I don't even think we've actually begun the real process we need to begin in this community. I'm ready to begin the conversations of whether the lay-by is desirable to the full community, what the community space will look like, to start talking about who can possibly join the co-op and the Ability Project and call Tacoma Junction home. So I'm not ready to end it, but I really want to begin this process with the entire community. And I am, you know, I'll just reiterate again, we are going to hold NDC to that development agreement. That means making reasonable accommodations for the co-op's continued operations, because in my mind, anything moving forward, the co-op is part of that vision for the junction. So it has been a long process. It's getting late. And I just want to thank all of you for being part of it. And I am looking forward to the continued engagement and working together. Thank you. Did you want to say something else? Did you? Okay. All right. So I'm voting for A. Sorry. Say that. So I believe we have 6 for A and 1 for B at the moment. So with my colleagues' permission, we can look at the resolution that talks about voting for option A. Does anyone have any? Yes, go ahead.
I do, and it's regarding the resolution.
Okay.
Now, in the actual agreement, the development agreement, as you can see in A, it reads, require NDC to seek a letter of intent with another anchor tenant for the project other than the co-op and to provide reasonable accommodation to the co-op for its continued operation of its business and its current facility. I was wondering if it makes sense to, after the word facility, to put in there as more specifically described in the agreement, because the agreement outlines the loading of deliveries and parking, not lease any portion of the project. I don't know if that's appropriate, but I think it's more reflective of what the agreement says.
Could you just repeat your suggestion?
Yeah, so at the end of, so it says, and to provide reasonable accommodation to the co-op for the continued operation of its business in its current facility as more specifically described in the agreement, because the agreement reads, require developer to provide reasonable accommodation to the co-op's operation of its business, which includes loading of deliveries and parking, and not lease any portion of the project to all those various potential competitors. I think it's a little bit more exhaustive and reflective of the language in the agreement.
Although the only thing I would say is the whereas clause starts by saying basically pursuant to this section of the agreement, so it's...
Right, I mean, I guess it's sort of subsumed in there, but since we're talking about continuity of operations, it's just a suggestion that I have, and if people disagree, that's fine.
I don't see any problem with it. It simply just puts that information in a second place so somebody might more readily read it.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? All right, so then we'll move forward. Any other questions? Because we can then move the resolution and discuss the other changes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to note that in the now therefore be it resolved clause, the word it uses is authorizes NDC, not requires NDC to commence seeking a letter. And I think that authorized is appropriate, and just wanted to support that.
Okay.
You want me to stop, bro?
Yeah, it's good the way it is.
Well, that's the other thing that I noticed. And maybe we did this on purpose with the resolution. The resolution doesn't mirror the language in the agreement. Right. So, for example, Section 4 of the development agreement says, quote, require the developer to commence seeking a letter of intent. Mm-hmm. And then we here use authorize. And I just want to make sure it's consistent, that's all. So that's really not a suggestion or an amendment, but I think it's...
And my point would just be, unless NDC has objection, I prefer the word authorize there, because to me it enables them at their discretion to have the flexibility.
Right. I think that's appropriate.
Okay. I don't know if Ms. Daines has any thoughts on this. Yes, you can absolutely do that. You can call a friend.
Just get a 50-50.
Which is yeah. I think it's important to note that there were some revisions made on January 7th that are not reflected in this packet.
Those are, no, it's a different
Okay, so do we have...
Can you read them to us, or otherwise share them?
Can we get them?
Do we need them?
Well, we can pull them up online. That's the only thing I can
It's just the nuance that is addressed by, or addresses what was raised by Councilmember Qureshi and was also raised by Councilmember Kovar over the weekend.
Yeah.
Yep, I just noticed that this...
Yeah, because I'm looking at it going, this is not...
Jesse can go get copies.
All right, why don't we take a 5-minute break, and when Ms. Carpenter comes back, we'll finish this up.
Thought it was over, didn't you?
I know, I really thought we were...
Oh, that's too bad.
Devil's in the details. Okay, we're going to come back, and the deputy city manager is going to. We have the proper version of the resolution in front of us. The version that is on the city website is the correct version that we are looking at now. So if people are at home looking at it, the one on the website is the correct version. So.
And after all that, it's a very simple explanation what the difference between this one and the one that you had printed in front of you before was. And the difference is simply that in the second, in the last paragraph, the be it further resolved paragraph, we added the language in to say pursuant, to clarify pursuant to the development agreement. The first resolve clause still uses the word authorizes, and that language is used because we are authorizing, or you are authorizing option A.
Okay, good.
Great.
I have one other change. In the third to last whereas clause on the first page where it says whereas on December 7th, it should probably say in the co-op we're unable to reach an agreement on the desired letter of intent. But
To reach an agreement?
yeah,
Okay.
that's all I got.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And then we have the language that was proposed before, or after A.
No, we don't
A.
need that now, right?
Yeah, we don't need that
We don't need
anymore
it,
because it's
Because of the other
assumed in the
language.
final
Got
be
it.
it further resolved.
Okay.
All right, good.
All right, great. Would someone like to move the resolution?
So moved.
Councilmember Qureshi, Councilmember Schultz seconded. Any other questions or comments at this time? No? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? No, it passes unanimously. All right, we're done. Thank you.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah.